number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 15th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 16 degrees, minus 15 in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Emergency Act now in effect in Canada. Was it a necessary move to end the protest downtown or a Hail Mary attempt? Here's City News reporter Kevin Meisner.
The Prime Minister says the Emergency Act is necessary to protect critical infrastructure, including border crossings and airports, from blockades, but not to mobilize the military on Canadian soil. Public Safety Minister Bill Blair tells the CBC the blockade in Alberta and the potential for violence there is a perfect example of why these new powers are necessary.
And even with the police action that took place in Coutts, Alberta, in which very many firearms were located, I think demonstrates the clear risk and threat that these blockades represent to Canada, and it does require the government to take very seriously.
Interim Conservative leader Candace Bergen calls Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's action ham-fisted and suggests that dialogue could have been used to end the Ottawa occupation.
The Prime Minister had an opportunity to talk and to listen to people who he disagreed with, and he refused to do so.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says this is a failure of leadership for the Prime Minister to resort to using the Emergencies Act.
The reason why we got to this point is because the Prime Minister let the siege in Ottawa go on for weeks and weeks without actually doing anything about it.
Now, the federal government is able to create no gathering zones, force tow truck services to move vehicles, allow the RCMP to enforce municipal laws, and give banks the power to freeze the accounts of blockade supporters. Security experts divided on this move. Some say the blockades are not a threat to national security, but others say the federal government needs to take charge after inaction by both the province and police services. The act has a 30-day deadline. It can be renewed at any time. Kevin Meisner, City News.
City News time 9:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, Smiths Falls, today we'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud. We'll get into a light wind. Still quite cool, though. The high just -9. The average high is -4. Milder air, though, for tomorrow, but not until the evening. Will climb to +5 tomorrow night. Lots of cloud, lots of wind, too. Very strong wind tomorrow. For today, the high, -9.
And right now, minus 16 degrees in Ottawa, minus 15 in Smiths Falls. The Committee of MPs and Senators that oversees federal security policy has uncovered some gaps in Canada's cyber defense. It could leave many agencies vulnerable to state-sponsored hackers from countries like China and Russia.
In a new report, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians says cyber threats to government systems and networks are a significant risk to Canada's security and government operations. It points to Beijing and Moscow as the most sophisticated cyber threat actors targeting the government, while Iran and North Korea pose a little less of a danger. The report concludes the federal government has built a strong cyber defense system to counter this threat, but it's weakened by the inconsistent applications of policies across government. Karen Rebo, The Canadian Press.
City News time 9:03. Canada struck gold on day 11 at the Beijing Olympics. A trio including two Ottawa skaters, Isabelle Weideman and Evgeny Blondin, along with Valerie Malte, claimed the first place in women's team pursuit speed skating event, beating the world champion Japanese threesome in the final. Snowboarder Max Perot added a bronze to his collection. He finished third in the men's big air competition. Canada now is tied for third among the medal leaders with 17. Norway in front with 24. In men's curling, it's Brad Gushue up against Russia today. The Russians currently leading 4-2 in the seventh. Team Canada also needs a win over China this morning in men's hockey to move into the quarterfinals. After the first, it's Canada 2, China 1. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Is there anyone else out there who would like to declare an emergency? It's all the rage. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. We're always happy when you decide to spend part of your day with us. I don't think you'll be disappointed today. What a time to be alive, eh? What a time to be alive. Can you believe it where we are right now? I'm still trying to process it. As I've been mentioning for the last week or so, part of my morning ritual has been to do a loop around Centertown. Early in the morning, like dark and early, usually before 5 o'clock. And I was really, really curious as to what I would come across this morning, just given all the developments over the last day or so. The mayor's back channel deal, with the protest organizers to move the trucks out of the residential part of Centertown, try and get as many trucks as possible up onto Wellington Street. And now the pending use of the Emergencies Act. Announced yesterday by the Prime Minister, a lot of coverage of that today. So, drive up Elgin Street. I drive north on Elgin Street, and then I hang a left onto Lisgar. East down to Kent Street, or I guess west down to Kent Street. It'd be west down to Kent Street. And I really wanted to see if the whole Kent Street setup had changed at all. And this morning, I can conclude, not as far as I can tell. I mean, these are just the observations of one person, right? But Kent Street at that time this morning, my goodness, it looked as jam-packed with protesters' vehicles, than at any other time in the last week or so. So I couldn't see a difference at all. There were fewer vehicles on Metcalfe Street that I noticed, but not that I could tell on Kent Street. And when I arrived at the corner of Lisgar in Kent, there was a group of protesters standing there, and I rolled down the window, and a polite young man struck up a conversation with me, and I asked him if anyone had moved from Kent Street up to Wellington Street, and he told me, "We're just shuffling things around." His exact words, "We're just shuffling things around." And then I asked him if anybody had decided to go home, given what Mr. Trudeau announced yesterday with the Emergencies Act, and he said quite emphatically, "No, there are more people coming." So look, that's one conversation that I had with one protester at the corner of Kent and Lisgar at about 4:30 this morning. Okay? So take that for what it's worth. I know, it's all kinds of crazy. Then I drove by the parking lot at the ball field, Coventry Road. Number of vehicles there doesn't seem to have thinned out to any great degree either. So, I mean, we're 2 days into the mayor's back channel deal. We're less than 24 hours removed from Mr. Trudeau's decision to use the Emergencies Act. Has any of this had any great effect? Not so far. Not so far. So, coming up on the show, Christian Leuprecht, Monk Senior Fellow, Security and Defense, Macdonald-Laurier Institute. He is an expert in national security, federalism, and multi-level governance. So sounds like the perfect guest to get us going this morning. Going to talk about the looming use of the Emergencies Act. I am really interested in this FinTrack business, the whole banking side of it. FinTrack, Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center of Canada. This place tries to sniff out suspicious financial transactions, suspicious banking activity, money laundering, the financing of terrorist activity. That's usually its domain. And now the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister, thinks it could be a key to ending these protests because it could starve the organizers of money. And we know they've raised big, big money. Let me quote a little bit from the Globe and Mail this morning. Quote, "The measures will also allow police, government agencies, and banks to, quote, share relevant information. Quote, that includes a requirement that banks report financial relationships with customers involved in the illegal blockades to the RCMP or the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS. It's a really interesting report from the Globe this morning. It's in the Report on Business. What went into this? The government has given this some thought. Some planning went into this, using these extraordinary powers in the Emergencies Act to potentially freeze funds in the commercial and personal bank accounts of Canadians. Listen to this. Ms. Freeland arranged 2 calls in as many days with the chief executive officers of the country's largest banks to discuss the new measures. The first call was held over the weekend for initial high-level discussions with bank CEOs about how the financial sector could help, according to 2 banking industry sources familiar with the call. A second conference call between Ms. Freeland and Deputy Finance Minister Michael Sabia and the bank CEOs was scheduled for Monday evening. In other words, last night. So I find the whole thing fascinating. Just the very idea that this is even where we are. I don't know. I try to put it down to kind of the retail level. You know, I think about some guy who left his job somewhere in Western Canada because he didn't want to be vaccinated, and he drove all the way to Ottawa and has now spent the last 3 weekends here. Got bills to pay, vehicle payment, insurance payments, has to put fuel in the vehicle, and maybe wherever that guy is from, maybe he has to pay rent or a mortgage, utilities, all that stuff, right? And there's this pledge from the organizers, don't worry, we're going to take care of you while you're here in Ottawa. You know, we've raised whatever it is, $9 million or something. And we've heard callers to this program have said, Rob, money has not been a problem. Well, what if that guy goes to the bank machine one day and his bank account is frozen? What if he gets a call from his insurance company? Your insurance policy is canceled because he's taken money from what the government says is an illegal source of funding under the Emergencies Act. Gosh, it's a striking development, and it's going to be interesting to see if it has its desired effect. If that gives some of these protesters reason to think, you know what? I can't take that risk. I think I'm going to pack up and go home. Maybe it just makes matters worse. I don't know. I guess that's the calculated risk that the government feels it has to take right now. So look, we're going to get into all of this with our expert, our commentators this morning, as well. The professor is back, Ian Lee, Associate Professor, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, with us every Tuesday morning after the 9:30 news. Syndicated columnist, my friend on the right side of things, Michael Taube, after the 11 o'clock news. We do have events happening this morning that we'll be covering for you, live events. There's a meeting of the Ottawa Police Services Board this morning. I don't know how much of this is going to be for public consumption, because it looks like, just from going over the agenda this morning, that most of the discussion at this meeting will be held what's known as in camera. In other words, in secret. In other words, behind closed doors. The board is supposed to get an update on the Enhanced Integrated Command Center, and then everything is supposed to go behind closed doors, and members of the police board are to be briefed on, quote, intelligence surrounding the demonstrations. Oh, to be a fly on that wall, eh? Oh, yeah. That's not for public consumption, however. So that will begin at 10:30 this morning. And then at 2 o'clock this afternoon, there's the special city council meeting. That meeting was supposed to happen on Monday. Then it was moved to today at 11 o'clock, and now it's been pushed back further to 2 o'clock this afternoon. Rogers Television will have the city council meeting, and at that meeting, all the councillors are supposed to get an update from the Ottawa Police and the city manager and any other relevant senior managers at the City of Ottawa. So Rogers TV will take care of you there, along with our team here at City News. One item to watch is going to be the Luloff-Meehan motion that we talked about yesterday. Those two councillors want the city to write to the Attorney General of Ontario, have the Attorney General of Ontario ask the Chief of Defence Staff to call in the Army. Use the section of the National Defence Act related to aid to the civil power. So, man, there's a lot to watch for today. We'll do the Talk Back Hour as we do between 10 and 11 o'clock, taking your phone calls, gathering your opinions on the big news of the day, the Emergencies Act. Right? Never been used before. Piece of legislation that's been around for 35 years, never been used, but Mr. Trudeau's going to use it. Do you agree or disagree with that decision? We'll start there, see how that hour goes at 750-1310. Going to be another big day in the news business, but you are in the right place. The Rob Snow Show on City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher, okay? You want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. You know, there's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin, okay? It's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. You know, then customer service. You know, we're big on that. The cashiers, the deli. You're not, if you ask for something, they're not going to point, it's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there, okay? If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers. And we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, you know, can you try getting me this? You know, can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now, okay? So we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to, you know, live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them that, you know, like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot, you know, from like all over the world. And we source it through, you know, distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. Nothing really complicated about that. You know, we turn over a lot of product. You know, we package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You know, you're always going to find, you know, Cuddy turkey breast, you know, Saint Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here, okay? Not only baked, made, like, you know, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread, okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. You know, your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments, and they're cut up fresh in the deli. Not like the big, you know, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag, you open it up and you throw it in the bin. You know, takes, you know, 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
The federal government will bring in the Emergencies Act to deal with the ongoing protests. Let's begin our coverage this morning with the help of Christian Luprecht, Monk Senior Fellow in Security and Defense at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Good morning.
Good morning.
What's your reaction to this development?
Well, what we're seeing is a fundamental failure of the modern state. And anytime we need to invoke the Emergencies Act to deal with matters that we could have simply, with a little bit of foresight and less naivete, we could have enshrined in law, I think we could have done a lot better on this. The financial measures, if we had had robust foreign interference legislation like Australia passed, we would have already been able to make these decisions without orders in council. If you look at just basic failures in Ottawa, like who had the wherewithal to let 400 trucks drive downtown Ottawa for a protest? You have a right to protest. You don't have a right to protest with your truck. We had intelligence agencies that we pay significant amounts of money for that failed to forewarn of the intent of these protesters. So I would think there are significant failures, especially on the part of federal institutions here. I think it's a lesson for Canadians that our national security posture is simply not fit for purpose for the 21st century.
So is this an overreach, sir?
It will certainly be perceived as such by some elements of the protests. And so I think this is, in some ways it does pour fuel on the fire, but I think this is perhaps also why the Prime Minister was more measured in his comments on the circumstances, and instead of further denunciations, looked more statesmanlike and provided sort of more neutral leadership and a very careful articulation. But I think any time when the state doesn't have foresight and needs to invoke emergency measures for things that could have been entirely anticipated, then I would say that's an overreach, because ultimately none of this needed to happen and none of this was necessary. And I do hope that by the end of this, we'll have a royal commission to examine what exactly went wrong here, so we never find ourselves in this circumstance again.
Well, there needs to be, I guess, as part of this legislation, there has to be a public inquiry called within 60 days of the conclusion of whatever emergency powers were put into effect. That's my understanding based on what I've read over the last 24 hours. But when it passes, I mean, it's not in force yet. There will need to be a vote in the House in order to make all of this happen, but that is a foregone conclusion now because the New Democrats have said they're going to support it. So when it comes into effect, what powers will the government have that it didn't have before?
Well, so it's interesting what powers the government did not accrue to itself. So unlike the October crisis in 1970, there are rights to freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, and for instance, lowering thresholds for search and seizure, for detention, are not rights that are being suspended. So it appears that these are very specific, targeted measures to try to stem the financial flows to the protesters, to try to provide more local assistance, in particular to Ottawa. In Ottawa, with regards to removing some elements and some of the vehicles in the protest, and interesting enough, accruing what is effectively contract policing powers to the RCMP. The RCMP has provincial police and local policing powers in 8 out of 10 provinces, but of course not in Ontario and Quebec, where their mandate is merely federal policing. And so it suggests that we might see a shift in policing of the protests from Ottawa Police and the Ontario Provincial Police to the RCMP, or at least a significant surge in capacity by the RCMP to support Ottawa Police and the Ontario Provincial Police. So this might explain why Peter Slowly, Chief Slowly, has been asking for 2 weeks for 1,800 officers, and why we're still waiting for those officers to arrive. At the same time, we saw plenty of RCMP officers helping to clear the blockade at the Windsor Bridge, so I'm still a little bit puzzled about why is it so difficult for a federal police force with 17,000 uniformed members to surge to the capacity necessary to contain the occupation in Ottawa.
Okay. What do you think about this idea of basically compelling tow truck drivers to tow trucks?
It'll be interesting to see whether this can actually translate effectively. I think this is why originally there was discussion about potentially bringing the military in under Section 273 of the National Defense Act in support of law enforcement, because of course no one else really has the capacity to get these trucks out of the downtown. And so the government has clearly decided that I think there's a bad hangover among the current Prime Minister from the measures that his father took in 1970, and he clearly doesn't want to look be compared to those, and I think that also explains the reticence in both invoking the Act and not calling on state assets in order to assist. But the challenge here is, of course, it's not just about calling in tow trucks. It's if you get into fisticuffs or you get into sort of more serious violence, you are now putting civilian tow truck drivers at risk. So it's not clear to me how exactly the federal government intends to clear the protesters and provide a safe environment for those civilian tow truck drivers, even if they were going to oblige with the federal request.
What are your thoughts on the FinTrack elements of this whole Emergencies Act? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have a puzzling agency in FinTrack. Okay. We have a fantastic financial intelligence capability, but unlike just about any other allied and partner countries, that agency has no enforcement function, or pretty much no enforcement capabilities. So the challenge now is, the idea in Canada is that FinTrack would hand questionable cases off to law enforcement, or when law enforcement runs investigations, they could come to FinTrack and ask for support. Well, the problem is, of course, that law enforcement, in particular federal law enforcement, that is to say the RCMP, has proven completely inept when it comes to investigating financial crime, let alone transnational financial crime. If you need any evidence to that effect, look at the hearings and the report that will be filed in mid-May by the Cullen Commission on money laundering in British Columbia.
British Columbia, yeah.
No one in this country has ever gone to jail for transnational money laundering. So we don't have the capability and capacity in our federal police force, and our financial intelligence agency doesn't have the enforcement functions that other countries have given similar agencies. So this is not just a matter of actually providing then more powers, additional powers to FinTrack. It is actually about completely revisiting our entire national security architecture. We have a criminal intelligence service in the RCMP that obviously completely failed Ottawa citizens in anticipating this protest. Maybe we need to do what the Australians do and actually stand up a separate criminal intelligence agency, as I suggested years ago. So there are many fundamental questions, not just about the invoking the Emergencies Act here, but about that our institutional structures are simply not fit for purpose.
Okay.
Australia, the UK, the US have significantly reformed their national security architecture, their intelligence architecture in the last 10 years, while we've largely been sitting on our hands.
Under our structure of federalism, I mean, we've heard it from the Premier of Quebec, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and others. They're not thrilled with this idea of using the Emergencies Act, but can they refuse it? If a province doesn't want the Emergencies Act powers to be used in their province, can a provincial government say thanks but no thanks?
Well, I think that's basically the signals that we're receiving from the provinces. And I think what we saw at Windsor, what we're seeing at Coutts, is that regular law enforcement powers appear to be sufficient. And so the Emergencies Act is more sort of an ace that you keep in your back pocket in case things do get out of hand. But it's still puzzling to me in terms of the response. Why do we need all these extra powers when in Ottawa, a couple of water cannons might be just a helpful, even psychological deterrent to park downtown that might avert having to accrue all sorts of additional powers, for instance, provincial policing powers to the RCMP. Yeah, we live in a federal system, but there are other federations such as Germany, such as Australia, for instance, even the United States, that don't have the same collective action problems that we do. So it's not a function of federalism. It's a function of political leadership, and it's a function of how we make our federal system work. And of course, what we saw for 2 weeks is the feds and the province passing the buck back and forth. Premier Ford acted only once his electoral fortunes were called into question by some of the economic blockades. He could have acted much earlier. And I think the federal government was basically trying to blame the local police and the province for what was happening in Ottawa when it's intelligence agencies that fundamentally failed here. So I think everybody needs to own up to some responsibility. And what I was missing at yesterday's news conference was the Prime Minister standing beside the Premier of Ontario and the Mayor of Ottawa to show that there's actually a joint voice and there's actually coordinated action. It seems like the federal government is trying to look like the hero now, as opposed to trying to actually coordinate effectively and solve some of these federalism issues that you just laid out.
Thank you for your time this morning.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Christian Leprex, Munk Senior Fellow, Security and Defense, Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Professor Ian Lee, after the news on City News.
#1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 15th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 15 degrees. It's minus 13 in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news this hour. Did the Emergencies Act prompt movement away from the downtown? It does not appear so. One of the main organizers behind this protest around Parliament Hill say they're not going anywhere. The Emergency Act does give power to go after money flowing in to those who support the protest. After Ontario announced the end of the vaccine passport for COVID March 1st, Quebec Premier François Legault says an announcement on the future of that province's passport could come as early as today. Legault has met with public health officials last night discussing whether the system should remain in use. At the Olympics, Ottawa doubly proud today. 2 of the 3 members in the women's speed skating pursuit gold medal winning team are from Ottawa. They are Isabelle Weideman. She won her 3rd medal of the Games to go along with a silver and a bronze, and Evgeny Blondin. They, along with Valerie Malte, won the gold medal in a skate against Japan. Canada currently on the ice against China in men's hockey. Canada needs a win to advance to the quarterfinals and is leading China in the second period 5-1. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Well, he's a regular contributor every Tuesday morning from his bunker in the glebe. Professor Ian Lee is back with us, Associate Professor of Management of the Sprott School at Carleton University. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, let's listen to the Prime Minister of Canada.
Yeah.
The measures brought in today are geographically specific and targeted only to where they are needed. These are not blanket powers across the country. These will be tools that can be used where and when necessary so that the police of jurisdiction dealing with blockades or occupations have the tools necessary and can draw on RCMP resources as necessary to keep Canadians safe, to restore confidence in the rule of law and in our institutions, and to make sure that our economy continues to recover from the impacts of COVID-19 over the past 2 years.
Okay, what is your opinion on the looming use of the Emergencies Act?
Before we do, I just want to put a big picture frame around this to put a much larger context on this, and then we can go forward, because I really do think this is important. I haven't brought this up before with you, Rob. In 1959, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled in a landmark constitutional decision about the powers of government and the rights of protesters in a very famous case called Roncarelli and Duplessis, the famous corrupt premier of the province of Quebec. And what had happened very quickly, very, very quickly, in the late 40s, the Jehovah's Witnesses were protesting in downtown Montreal, saying really inflammatory things about the Catholic Church. Large numbers of citizens in the downtown of Montreal were just enraged, like our citizens in downtown Ottawa, and they demanded the politicians do something.
Yeah.
So they started locking up the protesters, and the city passed a bylaw making it illegal to protest, and the court struck it down. So then people were still angry because they were still protesting. So what Duplessis did is he ordered the Quebec Liquor Commission. This guy called Roncarelli was a restaurateur, very successful, Jehovah's Witness, making lots of money in his restaurant on Crescent Street. Yeah. Everyone knows Crescent. So Duplessis ordered the Quebec Liquor Commission to cancel the license of the restaurant, like canceling the
he personally intervened to try and ruin the man.
They did ruin him because his restaurant went bankrupt, and they continued to persecute him, and he eventually left Canada. He tried to sue the Quebec government, and the courts threw it out, saying you can't sue Minister of the Crown because of Crown immunity. So he finally went to F.R. Scott, and F.R. Scott was a very, very famous McGill lawyer at constitutional law at McGill, and a close personal friend of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Remember, sidebar, very quickly, Pierre Elliott Trudeau started his career in the 50s by founding Cité Libre, a journalistic publication, to take on who? Why, that would be Maurice Duplessis. This went all the way to the Supreme Court in a landmark decision. F.R. Scott won and got justice, social justice, for Roncarelli, and the court, Justice Ivan Rand, a very famous professor, said basically the rule of law, and this is a quote from Justice Rand, means that no public official is above the law, and so no public official can suspend the law. Although Duplessis had authority under the relevant legislation, his decision was not based on any factors related to the operation of the liquor license, but was made for unrelated reasons, and so is held to be exercised arbitrarily and without good faith.
Right. So what does that have to do with today?
We'll bring it out as we go through the issues, but what I'm arguing is that the announcement that they're going to cancel, I don't know how they're going to do it, but they claim they're going to cancel the commercial insurance of the truckers and cancel their trucking licenses not because the trucks are not being maintained under the requirements of the trucking license or under the requirement of the insurance that you do certain things that I have on my car too. I have to do certain things. I can't drink and drive,
Sure. Yeah.
And so you have conditions. So what they've done is said, because you are engaged in this protest, we are going to arbitrarily cancel your insurance, even though your insurance has nothing to do with that. The insurance insures the truck as you drive down the road. And so what I'm
but that's not my understanding about the insurance policy, though. Let's how an insurance policy would work. Your insurance would not be valid if you filed a claim because you were using your truck in a protest, for example.
And that's up to the insurance company to adjudicate. But the government, Duplessis, Mr. Duplessis 2.0, is saying, I am stepping in. I'm not even going to give the discretion, allow the insurance companies to exercise the discretion of denial of the claim. We are going to determine and ensure that the insurance companies cancel the insurance. I don't see any fundamental difference between the arbitrary and illegal invocation of that authority of the federal government. First off, insurance comes under the provinces, and so there's no fundamental difference, I don't think. Yet I hope you get a constitutional law prof on to talk about Ron Corelli and Duplessis and why they could revoke their commercial licenses and insurance certificates for something that has nothing to do with the truck or the vehicle. And it's up to the insurance company to determine if you are in compliance.
This is the take in the Globe and Mail's editorial today. I don't know if you've read it, but it says a few hundred people, talking about a solidarity protest, a few hundred people assembled at Queen's Park, carrying signs and banners, marched down streets that police had temporarily closed for their benefit. Then they went home. You can disagree with their views, and we do, but their protest was perfectly legal. What's happened at multiple border crossings and on the streets of Ottawa is an entirely different story. These aren't legal protests. These are blockades. As such, they enjoy no protection under our laws.
Now, I'm glad you brought, because I wanted to go there next. Okay, first off, I agree completely that the bridges are completely different from downtown. Protests have been going on in downtown Ottawa all my entire life. So we can't deny that there's protests on Parliament Hill. The bridges are not the domain of protests, and when I say bridges, national critical infrastructure. I've written about this, saying that no protester of any political persuasion has the right to close down, and I've said it repeatedly and over and over. You cannot close down a bridge, a national railroad, the Trans-Canada Highway, power stations, pipelines, etc. I've been
Let's not get too off track.
I'm in agreement on that.
Yeah, okay.
Now let's turn to the phrase illegal protest. If this isn't an Orwellian oxymoron, I don't know what is. Let me explain. There's protests. We understand there's protests. We have them all over. We have had them in Ottawa for a very long time, of different persuasions, against the Vietnam War, the bombing of Cambodia.
Yes. Let's get to the point here.
And then we have an act of Parliament. It's actually called the Criminal Code that codifies all the illegal, or I think all, or mostly all of the illegal behavior in our country.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, what I'm saying is this. Walking down Wellington singing Kumbaya or We Shall Overcome or We Hate Trudeau.
Whose streets are streets?
That's a legal protest.
Yes.
The moment somebody does something that's prohibited in the criminal code, that's no longer a protest. So people are, and Mr. Trudeau's been the most egregious of this, the deliberate concatenation or collapsing of the distinction between protests on the one side, which are legal, and engaging in criminal behavior on the other. Some people say this is a distinction that's meaningless. So I want to put forward the following thought experiment. A protester on Wellington walks down the road, loses it in a fit of anger, and shoves a knife into somebody. And we all agree, attempted homicide, okay? And we say, there you go. There's the illegal protest. So another person in Toronto and Mississauga doesn't even following the protest, doesn't know anything about the protest, in a fit of anger at his wife, sticks a knife into his wife. It's still illegal.
Of course.
The criminal act is what determines it's illegal.
Let's not deal with your imaginary scenarios. Let's deal with the scenario that's happening right now.
Right.
Along Kent Street, along Wellington Street, where you have hundreds of vehicles that have been parked there for 3 weekends. So what do you do? Is that a protest or is that a blockade? Is that a protest or a blockade?
Look,
come on, answer the question. Is it a protest or a blockade?
Can you let me finish and answer your question?
All right.
Okay. Yes. I'm saying prosecute them. If they are parked illegally, you prosecute them, you ticket them, and if need be, you tow them away. Okay. If any protester has committed any of those prohibited acts in the Criminal Code of Canada, they must be charged. But that does not make them walking down the street singing and dancing at night. That is not a criminal act. And this is what people don't get. They're getting angry at the protest. I get that. And there is illegal behavior occurring, and they're saying, therefore, the protest is illegal. And the Prime Minister is saying that. No, protest is not illegal. certain acts in the criminal code, I think it's plus 600 of them, I'm not sure, I haven't looked lately, spell out all the things that are illegal in Canada you may not do, whether you are protesting or not
This we all
protesting.
understand. Yeah.
That's my point.
So do you think in the end, people still debate this, more than 50 years after Trudeau Sr. used the War Measures Act. This is not the War Measures Act. Totally different piece of legislation. The War Measures Act has been repealed.
Right.
But even after all of these years, people still wonder if Pierre Trudeau needed to call in the army and suspend civil liberties.
Now that the NDP have decided to become the sycophant carriers of the luggage of Justin Trudeau, can I remind everyone, but especially the NDP, that the venerable, revered Stanley Knowles, who was called the soul of Parliament, the conscience of Parliament, was one of the few people who had the integrity and the courage to vote against the War Measures Act of 1970 by Pierre Trudeau. He said it was an egregious, illegal act against, I'm paraphrasing, against the Canadian people. He was a very vocal critic from get-go, day one. And Jagmeet Singh has obviously forgotten the founding principles of the NDP on that
Do you
domain.
think this is using a sledgehammer to swat a fly?
I think they've gone the nuclear. I won't use a sledgehammer. Goodness gracious, this is the nuclear option to go after a mosquito. I've got a mosquito running around in my house, or a black fly or a fruit fly came in with my vegetables and fruit, and so let's blow up the house. It's just so over the top for two reasons. Number one, it says that you have a national emergency. The premiers have already said, hey, we got no problem here. Quebec said, don't you dare come in here. Saskatchewan said the same thing. We have a big problem in downtown Ottawa. We do not have a national emergency. As Professor Carver in Nipsia at Carleton said, there is no threat to the territorial integrity or the sovereignty of the nation. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association has already come out and said it does not reach. The current situation does not justify the Emergencies Act. Should the police be prosecuted? They should have been doing it before.
Yes.
They should have been doing it from the day one. When
that's another component of the law. It says, that the emergency can't be addressed by any other law that already exists. And that, of course, there are all kinds of laws that exist.
And can I
think
remind
that's
everybody
your point.
very quickly, our emergency minister, the Liberal emergency minister, Bill Blair, 5 days ago said, we've already got enough laws on the books. He says, you just got to go enforce them. So the Liberal government itself understood there's adequate laws in the country, in the nation, to do this. This is not a problem of lack of tools. This is a problem of lack of enforcement. And there's people who are very supportive of Mr. Trudeau saying that.
Gotta stop. We'll be right back. Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School at Carleton. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Hey, let's listen to the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland.
The government is issuing an order with immediate effect under the Emergencies Act, authorizing Canadian financial institutions to temporarily cease providing financial services where the institution suspects that an account is being used to further the illegal blockades and occupations. This order covers both personal and corporate accounts. If your truck is being used in these illegal blockades, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. Send your semi-trailers home.
Okay, Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School. You disagree with that?
Just before I get in and tell you what's so wrong with this from beginning to end, Duplessis used the exact same argument. No, hear me out, Rob. Hear me out. This is not trivial.
All right.
Roncarelli and Duplessis is a landmark decision that went around the world.
Yeah. Okay.
Duplessis argued, what are you talking about that it had nothing to do with it canceling his liquor license? He said Roncarelli was using the profits from his restaurant to support the protesters. Therefore, I was entitled. She is using the Duplessis argument. They're using their assets to support the protest. But that's not actually my fundamental problem with what she said. There's one word, and I'm just amazed that no journalist has focused on that word in what you just read, and I have highlighted on the transcript that the Toronto Star conveniently provided last night. Okay? And that one word is here. It's right here. I'm just looking at it again. We are going to, she knows the sentence, we're going to authorize financial institutions to temporarily cease providing financial services where the institution, and here is the killer word, suspects that the account is being used for bad purposes. Hey, what if I suspect that the Prime Minister is a neo-fascist? I mean, I'm being silly now. We don't, in a rule of law country, we don't enforce punishments to people who have not been charged, let alone convicted of a crime. You cannot have your house taken from you or your bank account frozen if you haven't done anything illegal. What they're saying is not only is it not even the government, they're saying to the banks, if you suspect, maybe you don't even have any basis for it, maybe you just had a bad day, you can shut down that business by seizing the account. If you freeze the account, I didn't say they're confiscating the money, but if you freeze the account of somebody, that means they can't make their mortgage payments, they can't make their business payments.
Hold on. We've isolated. Hold on. We've isolated it. Just to drive it home what you're talking about. Play it again there, David.
To temporarily cease providing financial services where the institution suspects that an account is being used to further the illegal blockades and occupations.
This is woulda, shoulda, coulda. You know, if I had $1 million, I wouldn't be talking to Rob Snow. I'd be down in Florida right now. If you suspect this, if you suspect that.
You should sell that mansion in the glebe you live in then.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, this is so wishy-washy and subjective. And more to the point, we don't seize people's assets based on a whim because I don't like it. Look, I'm sure there's lots of people that hate my guts. Next thing we're going to do, well, we better take Ian Lee's and seize his bank accounts because look at how terrible this man is.
All right.
We don't do that. That's what Putin does. That's what China does. We don't do that in Canada. Okay. We have a rule of law that says before we impose any punishments on you, you have to be convicted under the criminal code. You have to be charged, prosecuted, and then convicted. In this instance, there's not even charges being laid in what she anticipates. All you have to do is suspect somebody is, kind of, not on the up and up. Good enough. That's it. We're going to freeze the bank account.
I don't know if that would be good enough.
And we're going to cancel your truck insurance, and we're going to make sure that your commercial license is revoked. This is pure Roncarelli and Duplessis and the Supreme Court of Canada.
But I do wonder, and let's conclude on this. I get a couple of comments from you on this, how we here in this country ended up in this mess. I don't know. I look at what's happening in other countries. Okay, what's happening in other countries? The United States just had the Super Bowl. Everybody had a great time, right? The UK, no restrictions in the UK. Right. These are our peer countries. right?
Yes.
You would agree. You love to talk about, the OECD, right?
Yes,
Sweden, Denmark,
right.
Norway, they've all ended their COVID restrictions. We have medical officers of health from Dr. Tam on down who have said we have to learn to live with this, right?
Yeah.
And yet, look at where we are. We have protesters camped out for 3 weeks. Some of them are behaving just boorishly, terribly.
Yes.
And we have a government that has used this as such a wedge. It's wedged itself so badly that it has had to move to enact emergency measures. It's really quite something, isn't it?
I will probably be criticized for this, but I do put the blame on the person at the top because that's the person who's given the big bucks, the big title.
That's where it is.
Premier Legault said only yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I think it was yesterday, he said the Prime Minister has been putting oil, he said, I used the word gasoline, but he said has been putting oil on the fire to make it, to inflame it. The backbenchers of the Liberal Party have said this exact same thing. Premiers across Canada, so it's not just Ian Lee all by his little lonesome saying that. The Prime Minister has called these protesters, they may be odious, we may dislike them, but they are Canadian citizens from across the country, mostly. Sure, there's a few Americans there, but the majority are from across the country. They're working class people. Some are truck drivers, some are tradesmen. What did the Prime Minister call them repeatedly? He said they are misogynist, deplorable racists. What Prime Minister of any party, of any political persuasion, goes around labeling a third of the population, except Hillary Clinton maybe, and it cost her the election for president, as we know, in 2016. What person, liberal or conservative or NDP or Green, goes around saying everybody who disagrees with me is deplorable and disgusting and misogynist and racist? This is so extreme. This is so far over the top. This is so far over the edge. It is absolutely not acceptable no matter who says it. You cannot go around labeling a third of the population that you disagree with as racist, misogynist, deplorables. Okay. That's just wrong, people. It's wrong.
All right.
I can't make it more clear than that.
I know. All right. Have an opinion next time I call it. Really.
No, it's just on this one.
Okay.
I don't want... I mean, he's calling me a racist misogynist because I disagree with him. That's so preposterously, idiotically dishonest, people.
All right. We're out of time. I got to go. Okay. I'll talk to you next week. Try to calm down. Two words for you. Decaf. Okay? All right. Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School at Carleton. Hey, Talkback Hour. The Prime Minister is using the Emergencies Act. Let's discuss. 750-1310. Rob Snow Show, City News.
for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 15th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 15 degrees, minus 13 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa City Council and the Ottawa Police Services Board set to hear rare Tuesday updates. For an update on the management of this occupation of our downtown, here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
Council set to hear an update at 2 o'clock, the Police Services Board at 10:30. It comes after a tense 48 hours of back and forth, a potential deal from the mayor that heavy trucks will leave the residential streets of Ottawa. Some have left and parked themselves closer to Parliament Hill. Some councillors would like to see military enforcement, many simply frustrated that officers don't seem to be enforcing things like stopping fuel from entering the protest zone and the return of the horn honking. Those blaring horns will have to deal with another injunction, this one from the city, which will help with people contravening municipal bylaws, including for noise, idling, and discharging fireworks. And the ongoing protest having an enormous impact on the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of many vulnerable residents. That's the message from Ottawa's top doctor and social services manager. In a joint statement, they say the pollution, noise, racism, and safety concerns are negatively impacting people's mental health, as many feel the need to limit their daily activities, particularly marginalized groups. Chris Curries, City News.
City News time 10:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, Smiths Falls, today we'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud. We'll get into a light wind. Still quite cool, though. The high just -9. The average high is -4. Milder air, though, for tomorrow, but not until the evening. Will climb to +5 tomorrow night. Lots of cloud, lots of wind, too. Very strong wind tomorrow. For today, the high -9.
And right now in Ottawa, minus 15 degrees. It's minus 13 in Smiths Falls. Canada has won speed skating gold in women's team pursuit at the Olympics, thanks in large part to Ottawa athletes. Japan was 0.3 of a second ahead with a half a lap to go when one of the skaters fell, allowing Canada's 3 to cross the finish line first. Isabelle Weideman claimed her third medal of the Games to go along with a silver and a bronze. Evanie Blondin won her first, and Valerie Malte from Quebec won a medal. That makes her one of a select few who've won medals in both short and long track speed skating at the Olympics. Men's curling, it's not a must-win, but an important game for Canada to increase their chances in the medal round. They're tied at 6 with Russia currently playing in an extra, and Russia has the hammer. In hockey, Canada leading China 5-2. They're in the third now in a game to advance to the quarterfinals. Kamila Valieva has topped the leaderboard at the end of the short program in women's individual singles skate. The 15-year-old Russian at the center of the latest Olympic doping controversy is primed to succeed in her pursuit of another gold medal. And Russia says some units taking part in military exercises will begin returning to their base, adding to the hope the Kremlin may not be on the verge of invading Ukraine. But James Longman telling us this morning Russia's parliament has voted to ask President Vladimir Putin to recognize the independence of Russian-controlled republics in Ukraine. That's a move widely seen to laying the groundwork for war.
Diplomacy, though, does continue here this morning. Germany's Chancellor is here for talks with Vladimir Putin. He will surely be looking for some answers about that vote and trying to work out what the Russian president intends to do.
Now, Putin says Moscow is ready for talks with the U.S. and NATO on limits for missile deployments and military transparency. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
All right, let's get this thing going today. Do you agree or disagree with Mr. Trudeau's plan to use the Emergencies Act to try and end the protests in Ottawa? Other protests across the country? Yes, no, why not? Let's get some reaction here at 750-1310. Kyle in Ottawa. Kyle, you're on City News.
Hey, Rob.
Hey.
Great show.
Thank you. Agree or disagree with this move from Trudeau?
Oh, I totally agree.
You totally agree? Okay, all right.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
it's
why?
Time to drop the hammer.
Drop the hammer, okay.
Really, this is not a protest anymore. They've literally shut down the downtown core of a capital city of a nation. and I feel bad for I feel bad for the truckers.
Okay.
I really do.
Okay.
But the organizers have basically come out with a list of demands. Some even want to take over the country, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And this has there's a huge divide between mandates and take over the country. But that's not a protest.
Okay.
They've taken trucks, they've put it and blocked off the city. And that's an occupation. And it's time to drop the hammer.
Drop the hammer. All right, Kyle, you've got us off to a good start here. Let's take this one. Sean in Ottawa. Sean.
Hey, how are you doing, Rob?
So we are going to have the Emergencies Act in Canada. It's never been used before. Agree or disagree with that move by Trudeau?
Absolutely disagree.
Absolutely
I think
disagree.
it's a complete overreach. First of all, if Trudeau had the opportunity to take hold of this thing right from the beginning, given all the intelligence and everything else that he had. So why it got to this point in the first place is completely on him. So why are we now taking these steps? Completely ridiculous, in my opinion.
Okay.
And and at the end of the day, although again, could have prevented all this. At the end of the day, he's going to be some big hero to the Liberals because they think that he's put a big end to it. When really, you know what, we should have never gotten to this point in the first.
Should have never gotten to this point. Okay, Sean, thank you. That's a good point. If we were to look back at the genesis of this, the vaccine mandate, right? Let's say the genesis is the vaccine mandate for cross-border truckers. And the insistence from this government on the need for that mandate in the name of public health. And then you have follow-up remarks from the Prime Minister, fringe minority, they're a fringe minority. Gosh almighty. That has just blown up, hasn't it, in the last month? A month later, you just sit here in total amazement and bewilderment at the state of the country. Look at where we are. The Emergencies Act to be used for the very first time since it was created in the late 80s. From say this questionable health restriction, vaccine mandates for cross-border truckers to the Emergencies Act in a month. I still don't quite believe it. As I said, I'm still trying to process it. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Stittsville. Josh. Good morning, Josh. You're on City News.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm okay, sir. Emergencies Act. Coming to Canada, an Emergencies Act. What do you think? Agree or disagree? What do you think?
I agree. I'm with Kyle on that one. The first gentleman that called there. I think it needs to happen. I think they've been here long enough. My only fear is that I do follow the head coordinator guy, the one that apparently started this whole act and came down, this Chris guy. And I only follow him on social media because I like to see what he counteracts to what the government does. And it's very comical because my fear of what's going to happen is it's going to turn into a big pissing match between him and the government because that's all he does.
Okay.
He doesn't care about what they do, and he just counteracts with stupidity. And that's my fear, is that he's going to take it too far, and we're going to be in a world of hurt when, and I like the
So when you say that, Josh, I'm sorry, just so I'm clear, are you worried about it becoming violent? Is that what you're worried? Because I that's crossed my mind as well. I'm worried about that,
and I feel like
too.
a lot of these truckers, too, they can't be getting a good night's sleep. They can't be sleeping any better than anybody else downtown with all the noise. So I'm pretty sure that they're getting grumpy.
Yeah, and it's not just, when it comes to the protesters, it's not just trucks. If you're in a big transport truck, at least you've got a little sleeping cabin, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Where you can, curl up, stay warm, whatever the case might be. There are people like in Honda Civics and Honda Accords and Mazda 3s who are leaving the engine running all night, trying to stay warm.
Exactly.
Man, oh man, that is not a good night's sleep.
No.
But they're committed and they're doing it,
And I'm proud of them for being this committed. I'm surprised it's gone this long.
And then, I drive by the ball field every morning, as I say. I drive by the ball field. And I mean, some of the nicest fifth wheels you've ever seen, right? Like those are people who are here and able to stay. I'm assuming they have heaters in these fifth wheels. I mean, they're like, they don't have to go anywhere.
No.
Right.
And I like that they're trying to cut them. I think cutting off the funding would be a huge thing, because
you
can't tell me that any of these guys are being able to afford this out of their pocket. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it's not cheap to stay in Ottawa for 3 weekends in a row.
No.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been boom time for the hotels. I mean, they've gone from please stay at our hotel to no vacancy in 3 weekends flat. Let's keep the calls. When you hear somebody hang up, that's when you call 750-1310. Pearl in Kempville. Pearl.
Good morning, Rob.
My gosh, Pearl.
I'm not part of a fringe group, and I'm not a racist or a misogynist.
Yeah.
What our Prime Minister called this group, which I thought was a disgusting, deplorable remark.
Okay. So what do you think of this move, Pearl?
I don't agree with the enacting the Emergency Act.
Okay.
I think it's too extreme, and I think it might and probably will incite violence, which has the protests so far by our good fellow, I call them fellow Canadians, and they are. They're good citizens of Canada and fellow Canadians. They just had it. They found there was no way that they could move and make a living, and they said, we're going to Ottawa.
That was the last straw, right? That was the last straw.
They were desperate. And I don't agree with I even heard a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but a lawyer from Queen's Park. He said, there's certain criteria you got to adhere to or be happening in your country before you can enact that law. And he said, this, to his knowledge, he said, this government has
well, there will be lots of Pearl. There will be. Thank you, Pearl. There'll be lots of legal opinions, of course. I mean, the government has its own legal opinion, and there will be other lawyers who will challenge that opinion. Quite likely from the Civil Liberties Association. Ian in Brockville. Ian.
Yes.
The Emergencies Act is on the way.
Yeah.
Agree or disagree?
I disagree. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the fact that our Prime Minister is born and raised Canadian, and here in Canada, last time I checked, we kind of prefer putting fires out with things like snow and water and not adding more fire to them. I follow, going back to a couple of gentlemen back there, I don't follow the main leader, but I do, for argument's sake, follow the actual page on Facebook. And there's got to be, I don't know where people are not seeing the fault here. Like when we see something bad happen at the protest, I'm with you on the protest. I see some good things about it. I see lots of things I don't like. But when the good side, let's say those old boy truckers down there, when they get kind of embarrassed by people doing something stupid down there, it's not the following day that I either hear you talking about it or I see a post on their page about it where they're trying to make up for it. The counteract to that is that when the Prime Minister acts on it, he doesn't do that. He just throws more fire at it. So I don't understand what, unfortunately, I think 3 calls now. I'm going to be the 4th call, and you said it was something that was worrying you too. He's asking for violence. He's asking for a lot of violence. I told you last Friday I don't know how this ends. Well, I can tell you right now, in instilling the Emergency Act is not even remotely close to how this ends. It's every other day on that page, Rob. You'll see something nasty. And then, like last night I get home and there's a 14-year-old girl who broke open her piggy bank, and she's walking around giving $5 bills to all the old truckers, and the truckers are just giving her hugs. Now, does that mean I agree with that protest? No, but when I compare something like that to every single time Justin makes a move on this, I mean, come on, man. Work with Canadians. We're not a foreign country here who likes to fight fire with fire and shoot guns.
Gotcha. Bill in Toronto. Bill, you're on City News. The Emergencies Act is on the way, Bill. What? Agree, disagree? Give me your opinion on it here.
Totally disagree. I got a couple of points.
Okay.
The thing was called Freedom Convoy, and what's Trudeau's reaction to it is to start restricting more freedoms. The man doesn't get it. Now, his father brought in the emergency
War Measures Act.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, War Measures Act.
And they were bombing. People were getting murdered. People were getting kidnapped. Trudeau brings in the same measures for bouncy castles and hot tubs. But my real takeaway on this
there's a more insidious side to it than bouncy castles, and you know that, Bill. So anyway,
no,
go
actually,
ahead.
I don't know that, Rob.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, trust me on that.
Well,
you're in Toronto. You haven't seen what we've seen.
I've watched a lot of it, and as far as protests go, these guys are the model protesters. But the real concern for me is this is they've just given banks the right to arbitrarily seize funds, and they're going to actually cover them their liability for doing it. Why would I ever want to have money invested in banks? And I deal with TD. I've got investment accounts, and I've got an appointment with my investment advisor there tomorrow to find out exactly what this is all about. I'll move my accounts. I'll find a way to get them out of the country to do something.
Oh, really?
I'm not going to give the government or let anybody have arbitrary access to the money I've worked a lifetime for. And if that's what this fool does, if that's the way he attacks Canadians, doing that, the problem is not the protesters. The problem is Trudeau. You want to solve this problem? Get rid of that clown on top.
All right. Got to go. Bill, thank you. All right. Wow. Let's rock and roll here. We have to stop, and then we'll be right back on the phones. Emergencies Act on the way. Emergency. 750-1310, your Emergencies Act line right here. City News.
When it came to opening the business, because I was so young, there was a lot that I didn't know about management, financial management, management of people, all around management, I think is the word that I always come back to. I think that I always had a passion, and I knew that I wanted to create a space for people to get their hair done, but I had no idea, even having studied business management, what it really took to open a business as well as sustain a successful business. So in 2014, I was actually working with Angela Sutcliffe. She was my business coach at the time, and she was like, what's your niche? Like, what separates you from other salons? And when we started to really dig, it was the curls. It was the fact that we work with all curl types: curly, kinky, wavy, coily, which is how we identify our curl types. And then you have straight hair as well, of course. But more than 70% of the world has some sort of curl pattern to their hair. And we just realized that was not being addressed. It wasn't something we learned about in school. So I went to the States and I traveled all over to kind of gain the information that I have now to be able to share it with our clients and as well as with other stylists. So in March, when it came, I thought it was gonna last, a week, 2 weeks, I think it started off at 2 weeks. And I was like, cool, I have 2 weeks to just relax, that's fine. So I was actually in a position where I was not happy, so to say, but I was a little bit happy, to be honest, just because of what I was experiencing personally. Now, when that extension started to happen, it was not a great feeling. It was very uncomfortable not knowing how I was going to support myself financially. So I'm so excited about the Academy. It's something that I started, and I launched it during the pandemic. So I've been teaching for a number of years. I've been educating for a number of years. I educated at Algonquin. I've educated at Versailles Hair Academy. And I've also educated in my own space, in this space and my old space up on Greenbank. And so it was just a continuum of what I've been doing for these years. When we have a client in our chair, it's not just about making your hair look great. It's about how do you go home and take what we've just taught you and emulate that. So now with a world where people want to quote unquote be diverse and inclusive, what does that really look like in a salon setting? And for me, it looks like being able to invite any curl type, any hair type really, because I can take care of straight hair types just as well as, I can take care of curls. And we cater to all curl types regardless of what you look like on the outside, we got you.
The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
The The Emergencies Act. The Emergencies Act. It's not the War Measures Act. It's not martial law. Some of the Canadian media, however, in very high-profile positions, say it doesn't curtail charter rights. I don't think they've read the act because it's as plain as day that it can curtail charter rights. Absolutely it can. When your mobility is restricted, when assemblies can be prohibited, it's right there in the act. When people can be basically conscripted into doing things they wouldn't do otherwise, isn't that a curtailment of charter rights? Talking about conscripting tow truck drivers into towing trucks. I can understand the American news media not understanding the nuances, but come on. Oh, speaking of the American news media, yeah, holy cow! You know how Fox has just been pushing this thing, right? They have their top three hosts are Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, and Tucker Carlson. This was from last night on Fox News. Fair and foul.
So the left is so freaked out now because their COVID fortress of rules and edicts is collapsing.
Is Trudeau that stupid?
They're trying to stigmatize the word freedom.
The truckers have been peaceful. He's sending people in there directly to confront them.
Then from his bunker, he called the truckers Nazis.
Here's the way the progs at the CBC described the word.
It doesn't seem that bright to me.
When they still didn't leave the city, Justin Trudeau suspended democracy and declared Canada a dictatorship.
Okay. Declared Canada a dictatorship. Okay, not quite. Okay, not quite. Man, they are really pounding that story, though, aren't they? And the progs. Have you ever heard that before? Like, you're the cool kid in town, David. The progs.
Now, this is a
apparently I looked it up. I had to internet that one, and it's slang for progressive. The progs. The progs. Okay.
That's emerging lingo.
Okay. Abe in Orleans. You're on City News, Abe.
Hey, how are you, Rob?
I'm good. Abe, the Emergencies Act is on the way. Do you think that's a good idea, bad idea, agree, disagree?
I disagree with the Emergency Act. Like your previous caller was saying, he's afraid of it being a pissing contest. It already is a pissing contest. You don't fight fire with fire. As a leader, I believe Trudeau failed because a leader is someone who can see how things can be improved and then rallies people around them to follow that better vision. Tell me what version of Canada is better when you have to enforce an Emergency Act.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go here. Where are we going here? Let's go to this one. Leo in Ottawa South. Leo.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Leo. Agree, disagree? Leo, what do you think?
Well, I don't agree with it in a way because, first of all, I think it's gone too long.
It's gone on too long. Okay.
Gone too long. And first of all, if you look at examples with the pandemic, we learn from a lot of other countries, right? So the thing is, if you take example, European countries, when they have these big demonstrations, they really get control of the situation in a very quick matter, you know?
Sure. Okay.
They use these water bombers, they use tear gas, they use whatever resource that they have to use, but you don't hear about casualties or anything like that. And the problem is taken care of. I don't know why we can't do something in that sort, you know, and this would be over with, probably.
Why has this been going on for 19 days? Why has this been going on for 19 days?
Because, you know, maybe we're not experienced because we've never had this before, and countries in Europe have had these things more frequently than we have.
Yeah,
and, maybe they're more experienced than we have in these kind of, demonstrations.
Yeah, maybe so.
But, demonstrations, this is different because it's truckers and stuff, but,
right.
It all comes to the same thing, you know.
And don't you think, Leo, some mistakes were made along the way? Like maybe it was a mistake to allow all of those trucks onto Wellington Street in the first place? Just to kind of set up camp there?
Well, I guess they didn't think that they were going to stick around. They were going to be funded by all this money and, and all this kind of stuff, eh? You got to remember, these guys lost their jobs, so they have nothing to lose.
Well, That's a key point.
That's the main reason why.
There's that line. I used that this morning. There's nothing more dangerous than a man who thinks he has nothing left to lose. Right, Leo? It's very dangerous. Could be very dangerous.
Well,
yeah. Oh, sorry, Leo. I didn't mean to cut you off, but we have to move along. Khalid in Canada. Khalid.
Hey, Rob. How are you?
Hanging in there, buddy. Another day, another day. Here we go. Agree or disagree? Not War Measures Act. The Emergencies Act. The Emergencies Act, it's called.
I disagree. I disagree with it. I think that they could enforce the laws that are already on the books, and they need to stop, the special treatment of these protesters, which I supported initially, of course. Like most Canadians, when they were coming down, the Trans-Canada Highway, I supported everything they were for, and then they get here, and you see what it turned into. I believe there's sinister intentions of why they're here, to be honest. But yeah,
for some, perhaps. Yeah, for some. Yeah, see, in Coutts, Alberta, they made a big seizure of guns and ammunition, right? Like they were ready for a shootout there. Body armor and everything, right? High capacity magazines.
Listen, this is the thing. And when I hear Chief Slowly saying there's no policing solution, I laugh at that because I lived in Toronto during the G20, and I know the police have all the training and tactics they need to clear up the protesters.
Yeah. Well, they didn't hesitate to arrest people during the G20.
That's what I'm saying. And even the province of Ontario enacted, some secret law from, I think, the Second World War to take away people's civil liberties.
And it's not... Sorry, Khalid, and it's not that we want to see this kind of stuff here, but, they were trying to have a sympathy rally in Paris, right? I don't know if you saw the news about Paris. They put 7,500 officers and military personnel on the streets, and they were using water cannons and tear gas and everything. I don't know. I suppose that's an option. I don't know, but...
I thought, listen, as a racialized Canadian, I never want to see the police use force against the citizens. I think that should be the last option, but at this point, these people have taken over downtown. People's lives and work is all being affected, and at some point, we have to move them out of there. They can protest. That's a part of our Canadian identity, but they've taken it to a criminal intent, and now they need to be cleared out. And, and I don't, and just to go back to what I was saying, I don't agree with the Emergencies Act. I think they can enforce the measures on the books. Give them an amnesty period of 2 days. If we don't clear out, we're going to send in, there's been no use of tear gas and anything. You know what? That should be the last thing, but they need to clear them out.
All right. Thank you, Khalid. All right. Thank you. Be right back after the news. Halftime Talk Back Hour Red Hot today, as expected. Rob Snow Show City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 15th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 13 degrees, and Smiths Falls, minus 11. Here's what's making news this hour. The chair of the Police Services Board says they're going to meet behind closed doors first this morning. So instead of a public portion of the meeting getting underway right now, that has been delayed. Diane Dean's tweeting the public portion is now scheduled for noon. An emergency meeting of City Council in Ottawa also scheduled for today. That's at 2 o'clock this afternoon. It will include an update on the protest downtown from Ottawa Police, as well as from the city manager and other city officials. An increase in the number of people in Ontario hospitals due to COVID today, 181 more cases. The total now 1,550. The number of intensive care patients is down by 10, but 19 more deaths have been recorded due to the virus. A triple medalist at the Olympics for Ottawa's Isabelle Weideman, who was part of the gold medal winning speed skating team Pursuit. Ivani Blondin from Ottawa won her first Olympic medal, and the third member of that squad was Quebec's Valérie Maltais. Canada currently leading China 7-2, just a minute or so left in the third period of that game. Canada advancing to the quarterfinals in men's hockey. In curling, Canada did lose Brad Gushue to Russia today by a score of 11-10 in an extra end. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Agree or disagree, the Emergencies Act is on the way. The Emergencies Act is on the way from the Trudeau government. I read you a little bit of the Emergencies Act yesterday, but I just want to do so again today. Quoting here. Okay. A national emergency is an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that A, seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians, and is of such proportions or nature as to exceed the capacity or authority of a province to deal with it, or B, seriously threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada that cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada. That's what qualifies as a national emergency. So is that what exists right now? Hey, if you live on Kent Street or just off of Kent Street, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe if you live in Hunt Club, maybe the answer is no. Unless you live in Hunt Club and you own a business off of Kent Street. Are lives in danger? Is the health or safety of Canadians at risk? Does it exceed the capacity of the province and therefore the municipality, because municipalities are creatures of the provinces under the Constitution, right? Does it exceed the capacity of the province to deal with the emergency? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Right? Because the province had the capacity using the OPP. I was on the radio on Saturday reporting on what was going on in Windsor. The OPP had the capacity to end the blockade at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor without needing the Emergencies Act. But here in Ottawa, the resolution of the protests has been impossible. Now, is that because the province or the municipality doesn't have the capacity to deal with the emergency here? The police chief indicated that he didn't have the capacity. That's why he asked for 1,800 reinforcements. So maybe in Ottawa there is a lack of capacity. But if 1,800 officers poured into the streets of Ottawa and act the same way as the 1,200 that we already have acted, well, then it's hard to see what would change. Does it threaten the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada? Well, a strong case could have been made that it was when you looked at the situation that was unfolding in Windsor, in Coutts, another border crossing, the effect that was, the damaging effect that was having on the economy, And the fact that that was springing up at all kinds of other border crossings, hey, maybe that is a threat to the country's territorial integrity. But then, do we not have any other laws to deal with that? Because the Emergencies Act says it cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law in Canada. The situation in Windsor came to a peaceful resolution without the Emergencies Act. And arrests were made and weapons and ammunition were seized in Coutts, Alberta, without the Emergencies Act. That happened because of laws that already exist, laws exacted by law enforcement. So you see, we can kind of go around in circles here, but anyway, the Prime Minister is going to pass the Emergencies Act with the help of the NDP. Mike in Ottawa. Mike, what do you think? Hi, Mike. What do you think?
Firstly, just a couple points. I disagree with it.
Disagree? Okay.
This is the first time for me as a Canadian where I actually have concerns about our leader. I think Trudeau is... I think he's dangerous, to be honest with you.
Oh, really?
The rhetoric that he uses,
okay.
I just think it seems like he has no respect for the laws of the land, and kind of just runs on a whim. And I think he purposely divides and tries to conquer. And I really believe that Liberal voters should really think twice come next election about this guy. This guy is dangerous.
Okay.
I have nothing else to say about that.
Okay. Fair enough, Mike. Fair enough. Okay. Yep. It's interesting. Michelle, Ottawa South. Michelle.
I agree with Mike, but Rob, I'd just like to say that last week you mentioned that I had a unique view, and on this one I do.
Okay.
Because in 1970, my father landed his military Huey helicopter on the steps in Montreal. Because of the kidnapping of Mr. James Cross and the kidnapping and murder of Pierre Laporte. My last name is spelled almost identical to Mr. Laporte. As a child, I was terrified for my father's life. The difference here is this crisis is completely self-inflicted by Justin Trudeau and continues to be created by Justin Trudeau. The news is coming so fast and furious, like you said, things are getting buried. There's no time to follow all of it. Well, to the good citizens of the Ukraine, I say God bless you. If you're not slaughtered in the next few days waiting for your $7.5 million in lethal weapons, maybe you can send a thank you to our truckers. I believe that Justin is just creating such a mess because he's such a petty and empty little man. And anybody who's following him right now is wrong to do so. When we escalate to this point, things become extreme, and that's when people get hurt. And yesterday I watched Chrystia Freeland when Justin took the podium. And the poor woman looked like she was physically having a nervous breakdown. Her body was shaking and jolting and jumping. I don't know. I think this is insane what we're willing to spend. Get together, the caucus for the Liberal Party, oust your leader, send somebody out reasonable enough to speak to these people, and end this peacefully. Okay. But we've got, and I have empathy for the people living downtown. They're in an impossible situation, as I have empathy for our police chief, and I still believe he's doing an excellent job. If you've ever tried to round up a bunch of cattle, Rob, you know how difficult it is when they have many ways to go. And they've got to isolate, and it's dangerous. I mean, like you said, when a man has nothing to lose and a truck can become a weapon, do we want to risk the lives of our police force over this? For God's sakes, grab a set, go out and speak to these people rationally, do the job that you have been elected to do, try and garner some peace in this country, and stop wasting taxpayers' money
Michelle.
for your ego.
Thank you. Okay. Man, people are fired up. Shane in Renfrew. Shane.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
It goes, man. Oh, man, is it going today? Shane, the Emergencies Act will be passed in a few days. What do you think of that? Agree or disagree?
I disagree. I think that Justin Trudeau and anybody that follows him should be fired.
Fired?
Yeah. Trudeau should definitely be fired and move to China because it seems like that's what he's trying to do here.
Right, okay.
And we're just not going to have that, like everybody's just I don't know if anybody follows social media on this, but there is more every day, more and more people that are for this than there is against it. You know, we just want our freedom back.
Yeah, there's social media, and then there's what, the public opinion research says, the pollsters do their surveys. The protesters don't do themselves any favors. The majority opinion seems to be they don't agree with the way the protests have gone on. But at the same time, they do agree that it's probably time to end these mandates and actually get back to some kind of sense of normalcy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You can be opposed. You can be opposed to what the protesters are doing and the way some of them have conducted themselves, and also be in favor of ending vaccine mandates, getting rid of masks, ending capacity limits, reopening, and getting on with life.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's just it's been 2 years of this and nothing's changing. I'm just sick of this.
Oh, I hear you.
I want to go back to normal. I just want to say that Trudeau should be fired. That's all I want.
Trudeau should be fired. Okay, all right. Well, he's not very popular right now. John Wright had a poll that Justin Trudeau's personal approval ratings are where Mulroney was after Mulroney had been in power, whatever it was, a decade or something, and had done the GST, all of that stuff, stuffed the Senate and everything else. John in Kingston. John.
Morning, Rob.
John, yes.
I'm against the Measures Act. I think it's a bit of an overreach.
Yep,
maybe it's getting ready for, if they're still talking about interprovincial trucking mandate.
Yeah, they may do that.
Yeah, they may need a chance.
Yeah.
Like, things might get a lot crazier if something like that happens. I guess I don't often agree with Premier Legault, but I do agree that he may be just throwing oil on the fire.
Well, yeah, and of course, when it comes to, special powers for the federal government that could in any way affect people in the province of Quebec, they're not going to be down with that in the province of Quebec.
No.
Where they went through the War Measures Act, right, in 1970. So, although this is a completely different beast. The Emergencies Act is not the War Measures Act, John. Right? To me, the most interesting angle to it all right now is the money game. These protesters are not working, and the ones that have basically, moved to Ottawa on a temporary basis, if they don't have their own money, they need money. They need money for whatever, the hotel rooms or fuel or food and on, right? And then if they, maybe they have an apartment wherever they came from or a house or who knows what. I'm sure some of them have truck payments, insurance payments, all of it. And 3 weeks of living in Ottawa, protesting instead of working. You still got to pay the bills, no income coming in. And, the money's rolled in. First it was GoFundMe and then it was this Give, Send, Go. The Trudeau government's going after the money and the flow of money and the protests is Freeland's thinking. So they, under the Emergencies Act, are going to give the ability of the Canadian banks to freeze funds suspected of being directed to the protesters without any kind of court order and without the ability for the protesters to seek any kind of legal remedy. Like, you can't turn around and try to sue the bank. The bank is going to be able to freeze corporate accounts, personal accounts, cancel insurance policies. I mean, the protesters are making a big deal out of crypto, the ability to raise money using crypto. Look, eventually you have to turn crypto into cash somehow, right? The Holiday Inn doesn't take Bitcoin, the last time I checked. And they're not taking Bitcoin at Giant Tiger or Esso. Nobody's paying their mortgage using Bitcoin or Ether. So if a bank or an insurance company, any financial institution suspects that an account is linked to these protests, that's it. The account can be frozen and you'll have no recourse. Can't go back to the government, can't sue any of the big banks. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. I think about like the day that we were on the air and the convoy was coming to town and people calling the Rob Snow Show. I'm so proud. I'm on the overpass. I'm on the highway and I just saw the convoy. Here we are. It's what? A month later? Emergencies Act. Sharbot Lake, Kevin.
How are you today?
I am.
Yeah, I hear that.
Trying to get through another day, Kevin.
Tired.
We're just trying to get through another day and see what tomorrow brings, Kevin.
Can't wait.
Emergencies Act, Kevin. This is where we are now.
Overreach at the moment. Definitely an overreach.
Okay.
I'm going to start by saying I think the police chief has done a great job. It's his job to uphold the law. And, for the last 3 weeks, no conversations have been had with anyone, so they just use their politics to the political system to change new mandates, bylaws, and stuff to affect this protest. So the police have done what they can do. If there's anything unlawful, they arrest them, they charge them, but they haven't stepped out. So now I feel like Trudeau is, pulling things out of a hat to try to make something happen above the law that has currently been in place. And all police officers have been stretched way too far thin because, Ottawa, the borders, multiple places, we just don't have the numbers.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Don't have the numbers. Yep. Oh, we have to stop. Sorry, David. 10:47. I'll be right back. There's one free line available. First time all morning. Grab it. 750-1310 Rob Snow Show. Talk back hour. Your hour. City News.
Part of the reason I got back into this is because I am creative, and I also wanted to kind of have a fun flair, 50s vibe. All of the boxes are kind of fun names, the colors are fun, the logo is fun, and it's not just the package that I want to bring joy to people's lives, it's also the feeling that they get when they receive it, to know that there's someone that thinks of them and they're missing them and showing that they care when they can't be there. The smallest of the subscription boxes is the red box, the classical box. So you would get 5 to 7 items from the variety of categories. Those do change quarterly. However, with items that are more popular, we'll bring them back as people ask for them, or you could get them as an add-on option. And then those items will be included in the Jazzy box, the same items from the first, although they'll be in a larger size, more quantity, as well as a couple extra items. And then in the largest box, the Doo-Wop Deluxe, which is our most popular, that is a comprehensive offering of all of the other 2 boxes, plus additional. So for example, if you were to get a certain item in the smallest of the boxes, that item would still be offered in the large, but in a bigger size. So you're getting everything bigger, plus an extra few items. The first thing is I look for Canadian suppliers and manufacturers. That is something I'm very proud of. I make sure that the products are safe, that they fit into the packages that we offer, obviously. They have to be the proper size and weight. I have approximately 300 items that we have so far that we can order that basically help make people's lives easier. There's snacks, there's self-care items, there's entertainment, a little bit of everything. And basically I try it and test it, and if it's duly approved, then I include it in our packages. So some of the categories that we have is we offer treats, which is of course everyone likes treats, no matter how old you are. So we have things like nuts, chocolates, different types of snacks, maybe a handmade piece of jewelry. We also include pieces of jewelry as well, occasionally. We also have our pamper items. So your pamper items would include things like your bath soaks, your specialty lotions, things like that. 2 other categories we offer are leisure. Leisure would include things such as puzzles, adult coloring books, paint by numbers, crosswords, word find, Sudoku, if that's how you say it. And we also have items for self-care and health. So masks, sanitizers, sanitizing wipes. They're all natural, non-drying, made with natural ingredients. So they're very good for everyone, especially in this time that we're dealing with.
Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
So we're just getting word that the city council meeting that was supposed to happen Monday at 11, that was postponed until today. And then that was moved to 2 o'clock today. It was supposed to happen today at 11 o'clock, and then it was pushed back to today at 2 o'clock, and now it's been pushed back to tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And the councilors are not happy about it. They just started circulating a memo. Dear members of council, please be advised Mayor Watson has canceled the special city council meeting set to take place today. The intention being this meeting will be rescheduled for tomorrow at 4 o'clock as a result of the Prime Minister invoking the Emergencies Act and the ongoing movement of trucks. There's not many trucks moving, okay. The ongoing movement of trucks from the residential district, which is expected to be more significant today. The meeting is being rescheduled to allow council to receive a more comprehensive update and ask questions when the necessary personnel are available. There have been, I'm reading off of Twitter and off my phone. There have been last-minute changes to the availability of key personnel, including but not limited to the rescheduling of the Ottawa Police Services Board meeting for today. Further, yesterday's announcement requires more work and analysis to provide council and the public with a better understanding of the tools available under the Emergencies Act. There you go. All right, no council meeting today. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Then it will be rescheduled for Thursday at 6 o'clock and then Friday at midnight. Okay? All right, gong show. Luke in Barrhaven. Luke.
Rob. How's it going?
It goes, man. It's going today.
No
the Emergencies Act is coming. What do you think of that?
I think it's dangerous.
Dangerous, okay.
Yeah, I don't trust Trudeau at all with this. Not at all. There's no reason for it.
All right.
Like I said yesterday and before, Ontario's already under emergency orders.
Well, so is the city. Yeah, the city is too. Yeah.
Same with the city, right? Yeah. So, I don't know.
What are you worried about? What are you worried about, Luke?
I'm worried about violence.
Violence, yeah.
Yeah, because these guys obviously, they're dug in for the long haul, right? They've made it clear. They're not going nowhere. Even under all these other threats, taking the money from the fundraisers and seizing bank accounts, they're not going to go anywhere. What makes you think emergency measures from the government of Canada is going to make them go anywhere unless they come in with force, right?
Yeah, well.
But on the other hand, too, right? It's been a couple of days now. I haven't heard anybody talk about it. There's kids downtown with the families, protesters, right?
There is, yep.
So I think, my opinion is, I think with Slowly, I think he's doing a great job as a chief of police, but I think he's hesitant because the last thing you want to do is bring in, police to riot gear and you want to have pictures on the front page of every newspaper in the world with kids being taken away from their parents by force or, kids being tear gassed. I don't think they want that, right?
No, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. No.
I mean, no. What are they going to do?
I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do.
It's wild, man.
All right. Well, they're hoping that these financial measures will basically starve them of money. And they'll have no choice but to look.
They're getting money somehow, Rob. They're getting money somehow. These guys are well organized.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay. The Coots thing, they arrested 13 people, lots of ammunition, body armor. There was a video yesterday. You just have to play the end part of it, David, where one of the organizers says, here in Ottawa, pleads with the Coots convoy, demonstrators, protesters, whatever. Please hold the line. Don't go anywhere. Help is coming from the south, he says. Help is coming from the south.
In Alberta, at Coots, I know there's people leaving. Please don't leave. Stand your ground. There's help coming from the south. Stand your ground, people, and stand up for your rights and freedoms.
Wow. And a little earlier in the that video, social media video, there's a guy speaking French, and he's one of the lead organizers in French. There's a big write-up in one of the Quebec newspapers about the criminal history of that guy. You should read that guy. Alex in Canada. Alex.
Hey, Rob.
Hey.
Hot one today.
Yeah. Emergencies Act.
Yeah, I 100% agree with it.
You agree with it? Okay.
I agree with it. Yeah, I'm one of the few that's gonna.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
And no, sometimes I listen to you every day, and sometimes the talkback hour turns into the amateur comedy hour, and getting all your conservative listeners with the tinfoil hats on, worried about this and that. But I just want to say that.
Aren't you worried, Alex?
Not at all.
You're not worried?
And no, and I think one thing I do agree with is 100% with what Chrystia Freeland said yesterday. Follow the money.
Follow the money.
And you're working, we're talking about, U.S. funds and, cryptocurrency coming in from all these, coming in from everywhere other than Canada. What does that not prove? It proves that, the support, there's an ulterior motive, an ulterior agenda to the protesters, and it's coming from foreign entities.
What's the agenda? What's the agenda, do you think?
Whatever it is, it's with whatever movement, if it's against a liberal or, against a left-wing, kind of a way of things are going and handling of the pandemic or what have you.
To destabilize the government, right? To destabilize the government. That's why I ask you, aren't you worried about something like that, though?
No. I don't think it's gonna. I don't think Trudeau's not gonna bend and cave and go the way most people are thinking that it's going to get violent. I don't think so at all. I think with the police, Ottawa police, I think another thing when we're saying follow the money is I don't think Peter Sloly's done a great job, and I think part of the reason is do you think that these the cops are getting all this extra overtime? They need to call in extra resources, what have you. Is everyone not getting paid? And then wait till we get the bill when this is all over. I
don't know, Alex. I don't know. I mean, I've been working, 6 days a week on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to be an Ottawa police officer who hasn't had a day off and has been working 12 hours a day. Imagine working like 18 straight days, 12 hours a day.
No.
Outside in this weather.
Yeah, it's not ideal. It's not ideal situation. It's trying to make cuts. But and the last thing I'll say, just because I know it's going to go there, I said probably the best thing you guys could do for the Liberals is when you guys finally elect Poilievre to get up in power there, if he's your leader, I think that seals the deal for the Liberals. So I'll end on that. Thanks, Rob.
All right. Okay. Well, Poilievre, yeah. We're going to talk about Poilievre. That's a nice segue, Alex. Into our next guest. Right after the 11 o'clock news. We're right at a time for calls today, folks, but we'll do the talk back hour tomorrow, and this topic isn't going anywhere. We'll talk about Poilievre. We'll talk about the Emergencies Act with my friend Michael Taube, syndicated newspaper columnist, right after the news on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 15th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 13 degrees. In Smiths Falls, minus 11. Here's what's making news right now. A rare Tuesday sitting of Ottawa City Council has been postponed. It will be now held tomorrow. Councillor Catherine McKenney tweeting out that news. The Police Services Board was moved to noon today from 10:30. Now, Chris Curry's with more on what's expected to be discussed at both.
The ongoing demonstrations are having a negative effect on residents' mental, physical, and emotional health. In a joint statement, Medical Officer of Health Dr. Vera Etches and the city's General Manager of Community and Social Services, Donna Gray, said they're looking at increasing supports to reach people in Ottawa who are suffering, saying they understand that environmental pollution, noise, racism, and safety concerns are leading to increased anxiety, frustration, and isolation. And this has been especially felt by racialized and vulnerable groups. Many of this due to the ongoing honking of horns that has picked up again. The city has been granted its own injunction to help deal with people contravening municipal bylaws, including for noise, discharging fireworks, and idling. Trucks also now a bit more contained to the Parliament Hill area, as some trucks were seen moving away from the residential streets. A few councillors, though, still want to see the military brought in to remove the rest. Chris Curry's City News.
City News Time, 11:02. There has been an increase in the number of people in Ontario Hospital due to COVID today. 181 more cases today than yesterday, bringing the total now to 1,550. The number of intensive care patients is down by 10. 19 more deaths have been recorded from the virus. Now, there are 1,593 new cases of COVID today in Ontario. 159 of them are in Ottawa, 18 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 9 in Eastern Ontario, 7 in Renfrew. Now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
For Ottawa, the Valley, Smiths Falls, today we'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud. We'll get into a light wind. Still quite cool, though. The high just -9. The average high is -4. Milder air, though, for tomorrow, but not until the evening. We'll climb to +5 tomorrow night. Lots of cloud, lots of wind, too. Very strong wind tomorrow. For today, the high, -9.
And right now in Ottawa, -13. It's -11 in Smiths Falls. City News Time, 11:03. Horizon Ottawa says Ottawa's mayor has shown a severe lack of leadership by meeting with protest organizers over the weekend. The group says this deal made Sunday evening by the mayor and the organizers was a cop-out and a betrayal which cedes all of Wellington to protesters. Horizon says the deal was made apparently without consultation from City Council or Algonquin elders. Horizon board member Sam Hirsch says it shows a lack of leadership by Jim Watson and a move which sets a dangerous precedent and legitimizes the leadership of the protest movement. At the Olympics today, Canada won speed skating gold in the women's team pursuit, thanks in large part to Ottawa athletes. Japan was 0.3 of a second ahead with just a half lap to go when one of the skaters fell. It allowed Canada's 3 members to cross the finish line first. Isabelle Weideman claimed her third medal of the Games. Evanie Blondin won her first, and Valérie Maltais from Quebec has won a medal, making her one of a select few who have won medals in both short and long track speed skating at the Olympic Games. In men's curling, Canada did lose in an extra end to Russia, so they fall to 5-3, their record now. And in men's hockey, Canada did beat China 7-2 and move on to the quarterfinals. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So of course, there's developments by the hour. The Ottawa Police Services Board meeting that's happening right now is in camera. In other words, behind closed doors. And they're talking about top secret stuff. Intelligence on the demonstrations is what it says on the agenda for the Ottawa Police Services Board. So we can't bring you any of that, but we do expect at noon that there will be a public session of the Ottawa Police Board meeting. That will be virtual, so you can tune into to that virtually. The city council meeting that was supposed to start at 2 o'clock today has been rescheduled again. This was a council meeting that was supposed to happen yesterday, and then it was supposed to happen today at 11 o'clock, and then it got pushed back to 2 o'clock, and now it's been delayed until, 4 o'clock tomorrow, tentatively. Let's not write that one down in ink. Meantime, Premier Ford was in Hamilton today to announce a funding deal. He's going to provide, the government's going to provide some funding to the Dofasco operation in Hamilton for the blast furnace there to get it off of coal. So, $500 million announcement today, but nobody wanted to talk about coal and steel making in Hamilton. They wanted to talk about the Emergencies Act. And so they asked Premier Ford about the Emergencies Act and the situation here in Ottawa. Roll tape there, David.
Well, all the three levels of police forces are working together, Colin. It's the municipal and provincial and federal. And I can't, obviously everyone knows I don't direct the police. I'm not allowed to direct them, and I have no need to. We have just phenomenal police officers, and hopefully they're going to move them on as quickly as possible. But I just ask the protesters, guys, we're moving out of this. Why? Why cause pain? The ironic thing is, Colin, they're saying the freedoms, we're giving them freedoms, but they're hurting more people than the pandemic could ever hurt. Hundreds of thousands of jobs, millions of families. As simple as even the food processing companies can't get certain ingredients, certain widgets can't get across the border. Like you can't hold up the economy and affect hundreds of thousands of families. So to answer your question more directly, hopefully the police in the next little while, a few days, hopefully sooner, can move on. But, folks, it's complicated, Ottawa. Do you know what makes it complicated? They have the kids there. And kids are our priority, right? We don't want anything to happen to any kids. So please just bring your kids home, and guys, let's just unite. That's all I'm asking. Forget all this nonsense. We're in such a competitive environment, and we're all fighting amongst ourselves. Well, not all of us, but a small percentage is fighting against the rest. Let's just get along. That's all I want.
There you go. That's Premier Doug Ford just moments ago in Hamilton. So with that, let's welcome Michael Taube, syndicated columnist, former speechwriter to Stephen Harper, back for his weekly appearance on the Rob Snow Show. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. What a 24 hours this has been. So, you just heard Premier Ford's reaction. Premier Ford supports Mr. Trudeau's use of the Emergencies Act. He said as long as it is targeted and temporary, which the Emergencies Act is supposed to be. What's your general reaction to the move yesterday announced by Mr. Trudeau?
Well, look, since obviously Ontario Premier Doug Ford introduced the state of emergency in the province, naturally whatever was introduced by the Prime Minister, he wouldn't have massive opposition to. But on a personal basis, no. I think this is a horrendous precedent that's been set. It was something that could have been very easily avoided when you look at a number of steps. The most important one being that the Freedom Convoy, or the truckers' protest, no matter what you think of it, good, bad, or ugly, it has mostly been a peaceful event and a peaceful protest. Sure, there have been some screwballs and some nut bars. We know that, and there have been some incidents that have been caught on social media and elsewhere. But by and large, this has been a peaceful protest. It's just lasted a lot longer than most of us assumed it would. The Emergencies Act, as you know, and maybe you've gone through it on your show already, basically defines a national emergency as something that is, I'm going to quote directly from it, an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that either seriously endangers lives or seriously threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve our sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. And if there's no other way to deal with it. I think there were ways to deal with it. And I agree that obviously we've had issues and problems with the Ottawa police, the fact that the federal government did not meet with any of the protesters right off the very bat, which could have potentially cooled everyone's jets and lowered tensions a bit. It's hard to say, and it's easy to speak in hindsight, but I think it certainly would have been the right move to make at the very start. I just think that this could have easily been avoided because it has not been, as some of them people have been suggesting, some sort of a terrorist act or the fact that they're holding up the country. I agree that what they've been doing has been incorrect in certain ways. They've obviously hurt the economy, and when the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, Ontario, which is the busiest point of cross-border traffic and trade as well, which we obviously need goods and services at all periods of time for us to survive on a daily basis. That was terrible, and that could have been handled much better. But it looked like things were also resolving themselves to some degree. You know, the provincial state of emergency, which was then upheld by the Ontario Superior Court, allowed 3 levels of police, as the Premier was saying, to go in and you know, there were arrests made and there were things that occurred, but by and large, it was a peaceful end to, you know, a blockade that was unnecessary. There are other blockades happening to other crossings. They haven't been resolved as of yet. That includes the one in BC to Washington in the United States, and the other one from Alberta to Montana, which is also in the U.S., but they're smaller, and they seem to, at least in both cases, be getting to a point of resolution, although obviously, as we know in Alberta, as we heard, there were some arrests made, and they found a whole series of weapons, body armor, and other things.
Yep.
Unlike most people who've been involved in these protests, we assume, but it was obviously a terrible thing. But this just sets critically a terrible precedent. Okay. It was unnecessary to do. It does not add or enhance our democracy or our freedom or our liberty in this country at all. And now other governments, not necessarily the Trudeau Liberals, but others, can actually use this at different times if they are able to have a majority government, find a way to, quote-unquote, declare a national emergency, and God knows where it all goes. Hopefully this is an isolated incident. We have to assume that the Emergencies Act, like the War Measures Act that Justin Trudeau's late father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, put forward during the FLQ crisis in 1970. We have to hope that this is a temporary measure and that it goes away pretty fast. But it's an awful precedent to stand for, and it amuses me considerably that the people who are basically cheering Trudeau on are the ones who stayed silent during other protests, including Black Lives Matter. Fascinating.
Let's talk about the FinTrack angle to this.
Yeah.
The freezing of bank accounts, the canceling of it. This is the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, yesterday.
The government is issuing an order with immediate effect under the Emergencies Act, authorizing Canadian financial institutions to temporarily cease providing financial services where the institution suspects that an account is being used to further the illegal blockades and occupations.
Okay. What do you think of that?
I mean, again, you know, then it's the determination of the bank or the banking institution to make. And what if they get it wrong? Like, in some cases, they'll be right. If they see things that are a little suspicious and they want to hold it up, again, even during normal times, we do see matters like that. The problem with FinTrack, as a theory, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, dealing with financial intelligence and looking at it is important. But when mistakes are made, or if it doesn't work properly, much the same way if the Emergency Act doesn't work properly, we're going to all have eggs on our face, and especially the federal government is going to for putting this in. Could it have been avoided? Again, in this case, much like the Emergencies Act, yes. I don't like the enhancement or the enlargement of government in any level of my life or my daily life. And that's just not me speaking as a conservative. Most Canadians, no matter their political ideology, don't like it. I get why they did it, and they decided to do it hand in hand with the Emergencies Act. But if the Emergencies Act was wrong, enhancing the powers of FinTrack during this temporary period of time was wrong too.
Okay, let's talk about Pierre Poilievre, front runner for the Conservative leadership here. Is he twisting in the wind when he says things like this?
I stand with those peaceful and law-abiding protesters, including truckers, who are championing their freedoms and their jobs, while holding personally accountable any individuals who behave badly, break laws, or participate in blockades of critical economic infrastructure. I've always been against blockades, and I still am now, because I don't believe you can gain your freedom by blocking someone else's. So yes to peaceful protests, no to blockades.
Okay. Is he being too cute?
No.
No?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. For heaven's sakes, I've said it and others have said it. Why would that be too cute?
Okay.
I think that actually makes a lot of sense. The end result is as I've said to you and others, the basic nature of why the Freedom Convoy, the truckers' protest started, which was to enhance our freedoms and to oppose more government restrictions and regulations, such as the lockdown measures we've had during COVID-19 and the mandatory vaccination that the Liberal government passed on January 15th for truckers and other essential workers, that, those were realistic, intelligent, and basically concepts that I think a lot of people could understand, sympathize with, and see as making sense in a democratic society like Canada. The blockades are something completely different. Remember, we never, again, and maybe we should have, we never assumed that A was going to lead to B. We initially thought that the protests would last. I certainly didn't think it would last more than a week or so.
No, I didn't think you and me would be talking on a Saturday, the third weekend into it, Mike. I mean, yeah.
It's crazy, or you with anyone, for that matter. Yeah. I mean, I know other radio hosts, and I can honestly say privately, they can't believe this is still going on. People on TV still can't believe it's going on. I'm still writing pieces about this. It's almost been, it's been basically 3 weeks. It'll certainly be a month in the end, but no, I don't think this is twisting in the wind. What he's basically saying is, I believed in the initial components that started the Freedom Convoy. I don't agree with blockades because they hurt people economically and they hurt them personally as well. So no, I think that's a proper balancing act. And any politician, left, right, or center, who represents that, it's realistic.
All right. Further on the Conservative leadership race.
Sure.
Jean Charest.
I knew you were going there.
Jean Charest.
I know. We talked about
holy
this.
Cow! 1995 called. They want their leadership race back. Come on.
Exactly. Look, Jean Charest was the federal PC leader. Now let's,
right.
He has been in federal politics. He did hold a seat, and he did hold the leadership of a party caucus of two. Yeah. But look, Mr. Charest obviously went on to become Premier of Quebec as a Liberal, which, is fine. It's up to him. But realistically, Jean Charest, I know him. He's a nice man. Nothing wrong with him personally. Much the same way I like Peter MacKay on a personal basis. He's just not suitable to be not only leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, he is not suitable to be Prime Minister, and he never was, and nor was MacKay, in my opinion, because there are people who obviously could hold prominent positions, prominent cabinet roles, be senior cabinet leaders, but they can't necessarily do it in the big job. And the real problem here, very quickly, Rob, is that what's happening, I think, is that Jean Charest is going to become the candidate of the quote-unquote red Tories or left-leaning Conservatives, and they're going to try to fight it that way versus Pierre Poilievre and whoever else decides to ultimately show up. And if that sort of a thing happens, well, quite frankly, the Conservative Party of Canada today is more in line with blue Tory thinking or right-leaning Conservative thinking than anything else. Jean Charest doesn't fit that mold. He's yesterday's man. He's a nice person. He still has a role to play as a speaker to give speeches, to give his opinions, as a Mandarin, whatever. He is not suitable to be leader of the party. I know that Brian Mulroney, who I respect, and others are encouraging him to run. They really should look elsewhere.
All right. Thank you, Michael Taube.
My pleasure, Rob.
Speak soon. Bye-bye. Columnist, syndicated columnist. Read him in the Post, Washington Post, Troy Media, Looney Politics, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper. We'll be right back. Rob Snow Show. Still ahead. Ferry to Kirkov. Yes, we will talk about the situation with Russia and Ukraine. Maybe some positive developments there today. And the leader of Canada's New Democrats, Jagmeet Singh, will join us at about 11:45 today. Here on the Rob Snow Show, City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
It's a space that needs to be lived in. It's a space that people, have to have an experience of more than just art on the walls. I think, yes, the art on the walls is fun, and it's fun to walk around and see all the beautiful things, and the way Dominic and Edith have curated the gallery is certainly something worth seeing. But coming by and asking questions, again, to Dominic's point of view is, interrupt him, ask questions. I'm here on most of the days too. We have Luce that comes in, Nancy that comes in. So yeah, we have quite a few opportunities for people to come in and see the process, and of course ask a few questions. It's a great space. Basically, the one event that we did do, is the jazz shows, the jazz and blues shows. And I think the weird thing to let you know is that the acoustics in here are really amazing. I think that was the first thing that blew me away when we started doing shows, or when I was helping out with the shows. The other part of the business too is we do rent it out for special occasions too. So a few weddings, birthday parties, product launches, that kind of thing. So they're also a lot of fun. We do have one artist that's from the States, but of the 30 odd artists, the rest are from either Quebec, Ontario, and one beautiful woman from BC. But yeah, it's definitely part of the philosophy to maintain and canvas and show the beauty that we have in our backyard. You have the very, very strong personalities in Edith and Dominic, of course. It's wonderful to see how that actually balances out in the rest of the gallery. Without necessarily being, an objective, we basically have half female artists and half male artists in this gallery. But I can't say it's anything more than choosing the best people, and that's just the way it is. And I love that. I think it's great. You go through and you're like, wow, it's all pretty cool. And yep, it's half are women and half are men. It's cool. Like everyone else, we didn't know what to think, right? It's overwhelming at first. You just know that things are closed. And now you're trying to figure out what you do during that downtime, which I think everyone did. And I think in March, the first close, the first shutdown, it was a lot of actually recuperating and resting and not worrying too much on the spot. It's running a gallery is a bit like running a marathon with sprints. So there comes a time where, it's actually nice to just take a break. And then you wake up and realize that, okay, now it's time to wake up and deal with this new reality. From my perspective anyways, I think a gallery can be overwhelming, and I like to make it fun. So you're going to come in, I'll ask you questions, I might even joke around with you. The most people come here, they're not really going to buy art, but they could have a fun time and talk about it, right? And one of the things the gallery does offer is for local purchases, we'll be happy to drive it to your house and hang it for you.
Opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
11:23. Rob Snow Show. City News. Fox News is really hammering this story, isn't it? The convoy, the Freedom Convoy, the truckers' protest, they were all over it again. They were all over it again last night. I mean, you have to remember when they do these shows, I guess, Laura Ingraham, Hannity, Tucker Carlson, it's not really news, right? It's infotainment. It's infotainment. David put together some highlights for it. Last night on Fox News.
Is so freaked out now because their COVID fortress of rules and edicts is collapsing.
Is Trudeau that stupid?
They're trying to stigmatize the word freedom.
The truckers have been peaceful. He's sending people in there directly to confront them.
And then from his bunker, he called the truckers Nazis.
Here's the way the progs at the CBC described the word.
It doesn't seem that bright to me.
When they still didn't leave the city, Justin Trudeau suspended democracy and declared Canada a dictatorship.
It's so over the top, right? It's so over the top. No, not a dictatorship. Not a dictatorship. Not martial law. None of this means the government is calling in the army. That is something else entirely, right? We are not there. We're not there yet, which it's not to say it couldn't happen. But given how things have escalated over the last month, who knows where things go from here? Certainly not me. I thought this was going to be a one-weekend wonder, right? The calling in of the army. I know this has already been covered in some detail, but that's under the National Defense Act, right? Under Part 6, Aid of the Civil Power. And that is what Ottawa City Councillors Matt Luloff and Carol Ann Meehan are pushing for at the council meeting that was supposed to be held today and now to be held tomorrow afternoon. That the city pressed the provincial government to begin that process. And it's been all over the think pieces in the news. You have to read Section 275 of the National Defense Act. And it says there, quote, the heading is riot or disturbance is what it says. The Canadian Forces, any unit or element thereof, and any officer or non-commissioned member with material are liable to be called out for service in aid of the civil power in any case in which a riot or disturbance of the peace beyond the powers of the civil authorities to suppress, prevent, or deal with and requiring that service occurs or is, in the opinion of an attorney general, considered as likely to occur. That's what the Act says. So what's involved with that? Let's say they think there's going to be a riot. Or worse, there is a riot. And God forbid something even worse than a riot. Use your imagination. It doesn't take long to get to the worst case scenario. The Attorney General of the province would make a request to the Chief of the Defense Staff. The Chief of the Defense Staff is then subject to any direction that the minister considers appropriate, the Minister of National Defense. And then if they give it the go-ahead, they come up with some kind of plan and some kind of force would be deployed. So that's how that would all go down. Totally separate from the Emergencies Act. And according to the Prime Minister, not even under consideration right now. The Prime Minister has said, we're not even close to that. Yet. Now, a month ago, did anybody think we would be close to having the Emergencies Act? We're just days away from that. But I don't know. I just think it's important to understand the Emergencies Act, what it is, what it isn't. It's not martial law. It's not soldiers in the streets. It's not the War Measures Act. It is, however, a government granting itself new powers it otherwise does not have. Okay. Working on finding out more about what could be a potentially big news story. We'll let you know. This is the Rob Snow Show, and this is City News.
One for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, February 15th. Good morning, I'm Danielle Bain. Right now in Ottawa, it is -11 and in Smiths Falls -10. Here's what's making news this hour. In an announcement made this morning, Premier Doug Ford doubled down on his thoughts regarding the ongoing protests happening right here in Ottawa.
Why? Why cause pain? The ironic thing is they're saying the freedoms, we're giving them freedoms, but they're hurting more people than the pandemic could ever hurt. Hundreds of thousands of jobs, millions of families.
A police services board meeting is set for around noon today to provide an update on the ongoing protests, and a city council meeting set for today has been pushed to tomorrow to discuss the possibility of increasing supports for residents in Ottawa. There's been an increase in the number of people in Ontario hospitals due to COVID-19. That number now sits at 1,550. The number of intensive care patients is down by 10. 19 more deaths have been recorded as a result of having the virus. There are 1,593 new cases in Ontario, 159 coming from Ottawa, 18 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 9 in Eastern Ontario, and 7 in Renfrew. Canada has won speed skating gold in women's team pursuit thanks in large part to Ottawa athletes. Japan was 0.3 of a second ahead with half a lap to go when one fell, allowing Canada's 3 members to cross the finish line first. Isabelle Weideman claimed her 3rd medal of the Games. Ivany Blondin won her first, and Valérie Maltais from Quebec won a medal, making her one of the select few who have won medals in both short and long track speed skating at the Olympics. City News Time, 11:32. I'm Danielle Bain, and for News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
We're going to move away from the story that has dominated Ottawa over the last 3 weekends, plus, and the other massive story is the situation that continues to unfold along the Russia-Ukraine border. And we have with us Ferry DeKirchhoff, Senior Fellow at the University of Ottawa Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear from you. How likely is it, in your opinion, that Russia will invade Ukraine?
Okay, crystal ball a bit hazy. I really can't tell you. I just can't imagine that happening. I think there's something much more sophisticated at play. What basically the American intelligence says us it's imminent, but I think what is much more imminent is an attempt by the Russian, because of their heavy presence at all borders, to actually intimidate the president of Ukraine to finally say, okay, I don't want to join NATO, because that's the fundamental security issue at play. And if Putin doesn't succeed, I think he's got enough disinformation campaign at play to maybe destabilize the government of the present president of Ukraine and maybe win out the next leadership more favorable to Russia. But I think even though it looks sophisticated as an analysis, I think it's a bit more simplistic unless you go much deeper into the past to explain the present, which is what historians usually do. Politicians never do that.
Okay. What do you make of the news reports that Russia has decided to withdraw some of its troops from the Ukrainian border, send them back to their bases? What do you think of that?
Well, you know what? Again, I've been a commander of a platoon of tanks, and when I see that the ground is thawing, maybe I'm going to move some of my guys to a more safer territorially, not safer militarily, and maybe I can claim that as withdrawal, because Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, doesn't see, and he's got enough informer around, doesn't see a real withdrawal. So I wouldn't put much into it, but of course it's nice for the Russian to play it. And you had that rather awkward, scene of Lavrov and Putin talking in that same big table that they used for Macron, as if they had to show to the world they were talking about diplomacy. But I don't put much credit credence into the validity when you still have 110,000 people around the border of Ukraine. So I don't put much credibility into it, and certainly not much credit to a withdrawal.
Okay. What leverage does the United States have, or what leverage does NATO have?
I think the problem is that the leverage that we have is not militarily, because Biden has clearly put any military option off the table. And even if our Ruski friend invade Ukraine, there will be, quote, consequences, but none of them will be military. So in a way, the only leverage that NATO and the U.S. have is the fact that NATO exists, and that since we're not going to intervene, at least NATO, the other countries of NATO, members of NATO, are quote, safe and unsafe, because there's no way that Putin is going to go beyond what I would even say Kiev and eastern Ukraine. I don't think he would want to push all the way to the far western side of it, because he knows perfectly that if he invades, conquers Kiev, and establishes his control on the eastern part, basically Ukraine would eventually collapse into his hands. But here we're talking longer term. So NATO is safe. The Western Alliance is safe, but it doesn't have much clout into changing the situation if Putin decides it. The real concern, and this is why I still don't believe that it's going to happen, is that even though Putin has a numerical superiority, there's going to be still so much damage, so much death, so much bloodied, that I don't think that, despite his attempt to recreate the Soviet Union, I don't think that Putin is ready to invade Ukraine. Maximum pressure, yes. Prove to the West that they're not going to intervene, that Putin will try and reconstitute in one way or another the Soviet Union that should never have disappeared. That's the whole part of the gamble. But I'm not even sure today that Putin himself knows exactly what the next steps are. Don't forget that Putin is a tactician. He's not a great strategist, because in fact he's never been able in one way or another to define the role of Russia in the world. We know that Russia is antagonistic towards democratic regime. It's closing up to China, but Russia knows perfectly well that over the longer term, China is the big brother, and Russia, which has a rather weak economy other than in the oil and gas sector, is no match. So in a way, my prediction, but it's much more longer term, is that at some stage another leader in Russia will realize that whatever the size of the 17 million square kilometer of Russia is still a Western country, and in fact its long-term future is not under the yoke of China, but much more in alliance with historical Europe. But that's the longer-term future. But I don't think that Putin even thinks as far as I do, because for him it's what can I do today to screw up the West and regain a foothold on one element of the former Soviet Union.
I was always wondering, as I've watched this unfold day to day in the 24-hour news cycle, if Vladimir Putin would really invade Ukraine while the Olympics are happening in Beijing and rain on Xi's parade. Is that a crazy question to ask? Or
I think it's. I would never say that the question you raise is crazy for starter, because I'm a decent gentleman. I will tell you privately, but not in public.
Okay.
But when Crimea was taken over just after the Russian Olympics, I don't think that Putin would be all that upset, because, in fact, it may be a nice distraction from the absence of, dignitaries at the games, and the games will continue. But my sense is more weather-wise. If Putin has decided to invade, the question is how much will the ground thaw, and therefore make it more difficult for a beautiful tank to move on. Don't forget, as I said, I was a commander of tanks, so I know exactly what it is But I don't think the Olympic is a critical dimension. But if Putin can manage not to do it, and we're going to be just a week and a half more of stuff. The Americans think it's imminent, but the Americans have said it's imminent so many times that I don't know who I should believe. But I think the question is legitimate, but ultimately, if Putin thinks that it's better today than tomorrow, he'll do it today. But I still believe that he's putting pressure as much as he can, but at the end of the day, I can see him crossing the border, taking over. He took Crimea, but Crimea was much more legitimate. I know people are going to turn their stomach because I say it's more legitimate, because Crimea has always been Russian. But then if it's Khrushchev who gave it to the Ukraine in 1956 in recognition of the Ukrainian Communist Party having put him into power. But there's another argument which Putin also says, is that Kiev is an older city than Moscow, and in fact is very much part of Russia. So in a way, when you are trying to reconstitute in one way or another the Soviet Union, then maybe he will invade. So you see, I can contradict myself in one single swoop.
And I won't say you're crazy because I'm a gentleman.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
There is news that Canada is going to provide lethal weapons to Ukraine. Now, $7.8 million worth of weapons and ammunition and a $500 million loan to the country. What's your reaction to that?
You know what? Our lovely Canadian government is so nice and cute. They always come about 10 days after everybody else, and all of a sudden we feel the pressure to copycat. Let's do it. It's nice, but we're not a player. Canada has proven in the last 6, 7, or 8 years, and even more, that we're not a major player on the international stage. And I think that's probably one of the saddest consequences of all that, is that we were wonderful in combating Trump, but all our energies were put on saving our economy, and we did very well. I'll give credit to Chrystia Freeland and to Trudeau for that. But we've failed to articulate what is our foreign policy, what are our global interests, what is, are we part of this new emerging Europe without the UK? Who are we? And do we have a relation? Do we have a policy towards China? I know we're trying to get one. If you look, for instance, at the Pacific, the border of the Pacific, Canada has a hell of a big chunk of it. But are we member of any of the grouping, like the Quad, like the American, the Indian, the Japanese, the Korean, even though we've got much more territory on the Pacific than most of the other countries. But we're not a player. We're so insignificant. We have no idea, no imagination. So what can you expect? Okay, yeah, it's very nice to send, and particularly a loan. Can you imagine the loan after the Ukraine being crushed by the Russian? Can you please reimburse the fund that I gave you, the $500 million? There's something so light of the...
Unserious. It's not serious. It's unserious, right?
It's not serious. I'm not saying it's bad. It's nice to tell our Ukrainian friend we still love you and we love you and we adore you. But we're kind of insignificant. But I'm not going to condemn it. We're the laggards, but we can do it, and fine.
All right. Thank you. Always nice to hear from you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, Ferry de Kirchhoff. Gosh, I could talk to that guy all day. Senior fellow at the University of Ottawa Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. Jagmeet Singh is the leader of Canada's New Democrats, and he's going to vote for the Emergencies Act, support the Liberals on that. He'll explain why, coming up next. This is City News.
Opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, I had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business, so been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew it that we have to wait, and we knew it that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Wedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Wedel famous. I want to make the Wedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what their grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian, so all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches, we focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked, I wanted this love and this food over here, because I believe that will bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Wedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box, and do it.
Rob Snow Show. We have a massive breaking news story. Jason White is here from City News with the details. Jason.
Yeah, Rob, we have it confirmed. City News has confirmed that Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly is resigning as chief of police for the city of Ottawa. A heck of a time for this to be happening. Day 19 of the occupation of downtown Ottawa. But we have it confirmed that Chief Peter Slowly is resigning his post as head of the Ottawa Police. So, as you said, a massive story for this afternoon. We will have details and reaction through the rest of the day here on City News, Rob.
Jason White with the news. Our next newscast comes up at noon. All of this is happening as there is a meeting with the Ottawa Police Services Board happening right now.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Jagmeet Singh is the leader of Canada's New Democrats. Mr. Singh. Morning, Mr.
Hello.
Singh. Can you hear me?
Hello there. Yes. Greetings.
Yeah, it's it's a heck of a time to be in the news business. A heck of a time to be a politician on Parliament Hill, of course. I was wondering if I could just get some instant reaction. I know you're familiar with the story and all the players. We are just learning now that the chief of the Ottawa Police Service has resigned. Mr. Singh, what do you think of that?
Well, from the beginning of this occupation, people have been really critical of the chief of police and, frankly, the mayor as well, and all levels of government. I've spoken with lots of residents who felt abandoned, lots of small businesses that say they were struggling in the pandemic. It was tough, but the downtown core hasn't seen worse lockdowns than in the occupation, even in the worst of the pandemic, because some of the small businesses at least can do takeout food if they're restaurants. All that was shut down. People were intimidated, harassed, and they felt like the chief of police and the police services in Ottawa let them down. So this doesn't come as a surprise, given the really deep disappointment and abandonment that people feel, and the fact that we've seen other cities deal with this type of convoy protest in a much better way and prevent it from really taking hold in their cities. And in Ottawa, we're, like you mentioned, day 19 of this occupation, and people are really hurting. Because
what do you think he did wrong? What do you think the chief did wrong, the chief of police?
Well, the chief sets the tone and sets the decisions in terms of how you're going to respond to a crisis. And from the beginning, this was not taken seriously. It's not a surprise. The convoy made it clear they were not people that were going to be able to be negotiated with, because their goal was pretty ludicrous, but it was brazenly put on their website. They were trying to replace the elected parliament with a committee of their own choosing. They were very specific about how they're going to do it. They're going to meet with the Senate and the Governor General. They're going to replace the democratically elected people with a group of randomly selected, unelected committee members that were going to decide what happens in Canada. They, early on, were the organizers, were people that were very clearly planning on harassing the residents. Normal protests don't target people. They target the government. And that's completely legitimate. But when you're harassing citizens, when you're harassing small businesses, when you're targeting people by making the most noise late at night, when the only people that are home are families trying to get to work the next day, kids trying to go to school, it's clear that this was not a normal protest. It was clear really early on, and it was ignored, and it was allowed to grow and to build a momentum, and we're in a position that we should never have been in.
Okay. All right, let's move along to the big development from yesterday. The Prime Minister announced yesterday he will use the powers in the Emergencies Act. This was Mr. Trudeau yesterday.
The measures brought in today are geographically specific and targeted only to where they are needed. These are not blanket powers across the country. These will be tools that can be used where and when necessary, so that the police of jurisdiction dealing with blockades or occupations have the tools necessary and can draw on RCMP resources as necessary to keep Canadians safe, to restore confidence in the rule of law and in our institutions, and to make sure that our economy continues to recover from the impacts of COVID-19 over the past 2 years.
Okay. So that was Mr. Trudeau yesterday. You said yesterday that the very need for a piece of legislation like this is a sign of failed leadership. Yes?
Yes.
Failed leadership. And yet your party will vote for the Emergencies Act, which is being brought by a prime minister who you say has failed to lead. Square that circle for me, Mr. Singh. I'm having a hard time with that one.
Well, we're in this position because of the failure of various levels to act. We just talked about the chief of police in the city of Ottawa. There was a failure there to respond to this seriously. The province, Doug Ford, numerous occasions could have responded to this more seriously and didn't, chose not to. And then the federal level absolutely failed to respond. Because they failed to respond and take it seriously, we're at the position now where we have to take it very seriously. And the only, some of the tools available to take it seriously, to stop the money, which is one of the most important things. We know that this is a extremely well-funded and well-organized. There's millions of dollars of funds that have flowed towards this movement, towards this convoy. We need to get at that. This Emergency Act will provide some tools there. But I'm deeply concerned that we've got to this point. This shows that it was not taken seriously, and now it's finally being taken seriously, as it should have. The fact that our borders were shut down, that thousands of people lost jobs. We had auto factories that were shut down, not just in Windsor, but in southwestern Ontario. People were hurt by this, and the fact that countries are looking around the world, looking at Canada and saying you can't control your capital and you can't keep your borders open. And at one point, 30 or 40 convoy members were shutting down an entire border, the busiest in North America. People looked at Canada and said, well, this is not a country that knows how to run itself. So given how serious things are and given how serious the convoy is, and how well-funded and how well-organized they are. And their goal is just to create mayhem. They have no real clear goal that makes any sense. They're trying to incite mayhem and chaos.
Well, they say they want an end to the mandates.
It's never been about that. If you really look at their MOU, which is not something they tried to hide. It's not like something you had to go and dig. It's clearly pasted all over the website. They said they want to replace the government. It was an attack on democracy. It was fundamentally the group of people that thought that they had the power to go in and undermine a democratically elected system. That's what they wanted to do, really and truly. The mandates were just an excuse. It's not really what they're about. The fact that they targeted people, not the government, the fact that they're making all this noise and chaos for residents and not really focusing it on the people that are making decisions, and the fact that they're saying get rid of all mandates across the country, and they're targeting the Prime Minister and the federal government, which isn't responsible for all the mandates across the country. So it's nonsensical from the beginning. It was never about the mandates.
Let me ask you, Mr. Singh, just because we're a little tight on time here, and I know you're busy, man. We have federalism in this country. Some premiers say they don't believe that this piece of legislation is needed at this point. Should the Prime Minister seek the permission of the provincial government? Should he impose the Emergencies Act on provinces that say it's not needed? What's your opinion on that, Mr. Singh?
Well, where it's not needed, it shouldn't be applied. And I'm deeply concerned. This is a serious step. And I think, again, the Prime Minister took this step because the fact that he's taking this step shows that he failed to act earlier. For weeks and weeks, he could have acted. And now we're going to be very careful about its application. I'm going to be very carefully monitoring. We've got powers to, at any point in time, to rescind the emergency measures. We can do that with different mechanisms in the House. One of those is 20 of my MPs as a party, we can initiate a vote on it within 3 days to get it rescinded. So we're going to be very closely monitoring this. I'm worried about overreach. I'm worried about it not being applied appropriately. But so far what I've heard is that it'll be geographically specific and target the areas that need it. And that's a good sign, but I'm going to be very carefully monitoring this. I'm not going to give a blank check, and I want to make sure it's done in an appropriate way.
Very generous with your time. We appreciate it. Thank you. All the best to you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye-bye. That's Jagmeet Singh. He is the leader of Canada's New Democrats. Again, massive breaking news story. We'll have more at noon. Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly has resigned. More at noon. I'm back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. This is The Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays 9 to noon on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
This program is brought to you by